Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Haqiqatjou with your host, as always, Daniel Haqiqatjou. We have a great episode for you today where we're going to review a debate that happened just a few days ago that a lot of people on YouTube are talking about. And this was a debate between our Muslim brother SNEAKO and a very popular YouTuber that goes by several different names. He goes by Penguin Z, he goes by MOISTCRITIKAL, he also goes by Charlie. So he has millions of subscribers, and often his videos go viral. And these two were debating, kind of an informal debate, on the age of consent. What is the age of consent? Does he should there be an age of consent? And this is a topic that I've debated also several times. And it was interesting to see the fallout and the reaction, because as far as YouTube is concerned, SNEAKO is like persona non grata. SNEAKO is banned. YouTube has banned SNEAKO. His channel had over 1 million subscribers. He's been banned for reasons that are quite outrageous, actually. And Charlie, or MOISTCRITIKAL, has this huge following on YouTube, and YouTube actually hand selects Moist's videos for the trending tab. So it's like YouTube is going out of its way to promote this particular YouTuber, content creator, whatever you want to call it. And so they had this debate. You can watch the full debate on Rumble, on SNEAKO's channel. We won't go through the entire debate and do a reaction to it, because the whole debate is 2.5 hours long. If I were to react to that, it would be a 5-hour reaction. So I can't do that. And there's a lot of repetition in the actual debate. Instead, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to react to someone's reaction to the debate. So kind of like a nested reaction, basically. I think this will be instructive. Why? Because you have someone who is a fan of MOISTCRITIKAL and a hater of SNEAKO, who is reacting to this debate and commenting on it. His name is Tom Dark, and he has a growing channel, and he does a lot of commentary on different YouTube channels or videos. And he has this kind of what we can call a NPC perspective. NPC. If you don't know what NPC means, it means like non-playable character in gamer lingo, but it's basically a person that just has downloaded the program from whatever program has been sent to society by the powers that be, by the establishment. They just download it and they don't really think beyond it. Just like in a video game, you have a main character that can be controlled and has the will of the player. And then you have these non-playable characters that just recite a script, that just recite a dialogue or do certain moves. They're non-playable, they're just programmed. So NPC, this YouTuber, Tom Dark, represents the NPC perspective. MOISTCRITIKAL himself represents the NPC perspective on this issue of age of consent. Like, what is the age of consent? So it's going to be interesting, I think, to react to how people have reacted to, in the normie online space, to SNEAKO debating this topic. There's been many channels that have commented on it. Destiny commented on it. Vosh commented on it. Some Merc, what was the guy's name? Nick Merc? I don't know exactly. I don't follow a lot of these people. He commented on it. So a lot of reactions. And I want to give you a reaction as well that is very substantive. We're going to go a little deeper into the topic, into the issues, things that weren't said, that maybe could have been said. We're going to go through that, inshallah. But before we get any further, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and subscribe to our newsletter. Our newsletter is linked down below. I always emphasize subscribe to the newsletter because if the channel gets banned, we need a way to contact you and point you to the new channel where the content will be posted if it's not going to be posted on YouTube. So subscribe to the newsletter. We won't sell your information. You know, this is something that is an amana, obviously. So please subscribe. You can also submit super chats. So I'm going to be looking at the chat periodically and read some of your comments, and especially super chats. I'll try to read as many of them as I can. And inshallah, it's going to be a great episode. So go ahead right now. If you haven't liked and subscribed, do that right now. And we will get right into it. So this age of consent is a very touchy topic, obviously, because it's a huge taboo. It's something that is something that you will get canceled for completely. This is something that is so sensitive, and you have a big outrage whenever it's revealed that, oh, someone older 18, for example, popular YouTuber or streamer like recently Chris Tyson or Ava Tyson, who is Mr. Beast's partner, was involved in inappropriate chats with minors, particularly minor boys. So huge outrage about that. Huge outrage about this Dr. Disrespect. I don't know what he streams about, probably gaming. And he also was caught messaging a 17-year-old. And anyway, we're going to get into more of those details, but this is a hot button issue right now, and it's relevant to Muslims. Why? Because this is the number one attack that they make against Islam. In Islam, we know that the age for marriage is under 18. Like, it's permissible to marry based on maturity. And we know about the marriages of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where his marriage to Aisha radiallahu anha, his wife, was at the age of 6, and then it was consummated at the age of 9. So this is something that the number one topic that Islam haters will attack. Why? Because they have no other argument. They have no other response to Islam. Especially Christians really will focus on this point, despite the fact that the Bible sets no minimum age of marriage. And according to the church, for most of its history, the age of marriage was 12 years old. And there is plenty of evidence to indicate that even Mary, the mother of Jesus, was under 18 when she became pregnant with Jesus Christ. So this means that even underage pregnancy is something that is part of the theology of Christianity. Now, obviously, modern liberal Christians will bristle at this and they'll dispute this. No, it can't be under 18. She was at least 18, you know. The age of marriage that is set, or age of consent that is set by the modern West, that just happens to be exactly the same time that Mary, the mother of Jesus, got pregnant. What a coincidence, right? So Christians really bristle at Islam because they can't beat Islam when it comes to theology. They can't beat Islam when it comes to morals, when it comes to general morals. And we've had these debates with Christians over and over again. They can't win on any of those fronts. So they have to grasp at straws. And this is one of the straws that especially Protestants will grasp at. The Catholics don't, because they know canon law. They're not going to throw the church under the bus. Orthodox Christians don't really go down this route either. It's really Protestants who have no connection to any kind of tradition or history. And they just want to focus on the Bible. They really attack Islam on this point, but they lose on that as well. Anyway, so we're going to look at a funny clip to start off, just to set the mood, set the tone for this reaction. A really funny clip that someone sent me, or a short rather. I'm going to play it, and we're going to react to this.
My daughter's turning 18 tomorrow. No way. And guess how tall she is? 5'10". Hey, let me see a picture. Isn't she beautiful? She has your eyes. No, she's beautiful. She's a nice girl. Say she's beautiful. All right, this is ridiculous. No, I don't think it is. I want you to say it. Okay, just give me a second, okay? No, say it right now. No hablo inglés. Di que mi hija es muy bonita. Shit. Say it! Say it, Tom! Say it! Tell me! Okay, she's beautiful. She's beautiful. You happy? Tom, she's not 18. She lives on the West Coast.
Okay, so this is from Koechi. That's the channel. And he put out this short that I thought was hilarious. So 1 minute away from calling his friend's daughter beautiful. Oh, but there's a twist. They're on the West Coast, or she's on the West Coast, or they're 2 or 3 hours behind. So that makes you a pedophile. You pulled out the badge, the police badge. Like, oh, you're making these kinds of remarks about a minor, about a child, an innocent child, a little girl. She's just playing with dolls. She's just playing with dolls. And you called her beautiful. You are disgusting. You are a pedo, no doubt about it. So it's funny because it makes the point in a creative way. And the creative point that is being made is that this number is arbitrary. This is an arbitrary number, and what is it really justified by? Like, what is the rational reason to think that 18 is the number that all of society and all of history has to abide by? This is relevant. Why? Because during the debate, SNEAKO really presses this point. SNEAKO really presses that, hey, this 18 number, justify it. Why is it justified? And Moist can't do it. Moist can't provide a logical justification, as we'll see, and neither can any of Moist's fans, like this Tom Dark. They can't provide a justification for it. So let's look at this reaction from Tom Dark and start the commentary. Oh, I think I have to change the setting here. 1 second. All right, let me know in the chat if you can't hear this. No sound, huh? No sound. Okay, sorry. Hold on. So annoying. Okay, now you'll be able to hear, inshallah. Okay.
Personal beliefs. Do you think someone in their 20s should be able to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
To someone in their 20s should be, I mean, I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would do it. The maturity for people in the teenagers in the West is getting much worse, but...
Now, can you hear it? Sorry. Man, you guys are roasting me, please. Okay, it's fine now. Yeah, because, sorry, I don't have an audio engineer here to coordinate. It's just me, guys. Sorry. Okay, let's continue.
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for... I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore. Anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Well,
why would I tell them if everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
But they're still, like, they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that.
So I'd like to think that I have a more nuanced view than most of the internet on what makes someone a creep. I've taken a lot of flack for saying that people who are, in my view, not creeps, somehow actually are. Like, I don't think that a 16-year-old dating an 18-year-old makes them a creep, because I think that nuance matters. But right now, a lot of people are...
Nuance matters. So if there's an 18-year-old dating a 16-year-old, that's not being a PDF. That's not being, anything immoral and inappropriate. So that's nuance, right? And I think at one point Moist also agrees with that because of Romeo and Juliet laws, but then he switches back.
Are being talked about online and accused of a lot of shit. We had the Dr. Disrespect situation where he admitted to talking to a minor inappropriately. We had the Chris Tyson situation where Chris was a huge fan of Shadman and also got into some trouble for some weird shit they were saying around minors, which is not good, to say the least. And I think that both of these people should definitely be condemned for what they did. But one person who's been popping up a lot in the news lately has been SNEAKO, as he was defending Dr. Disrespect.
Pokimane, your audience is just jerking off watching you, and everybody knows that. And you know it. Look at her. She's looking down saying, stop that. Look at that cringe. She's cringing at her simp fans jerking off on the stream all day, and she's aware of it. And then she has the balls to go say Dr. Disrespect's a terrible person. Bro, this is my problem with this.
They're both bad people, but like that doesn't.
But nobody cancels Pokimane. There's no hate brigade. Everyone's like,
text a 17-year-old.
But she has 13-year-olds jerking off to her, and she's fine with it and monetizing it.
And he also had a very hard time talking about the...
So SNEAKO makes a good point. And he's pointing out the hypocrisy. And we'll see that throughout this debate. Like, there's always this double standard. And one of the main issues that we see recurring in this debate is a conflation of age of consent versus age of marriage. Age of consent versus age of marriage. These are two different things. And the law is different regarding these two. The law internationally, like countries will have an age of consent and they'll have an age of marriage. And these are two separate things. The age of consent is about when a person can consent. At what age can that person consent to be sexually involved? So if you are a 13-year-old who wants to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend and then be intimate with them, is that legal? That's the age of consent. Like, if the age of consent is at 13 or younger, then that is allowed. Age of marriage is what is the minimum age for getting married. So these are two separate things, and it's important because SNEAKO, as a good Muslim, focuses on the age of marriage, and because we understand that sex outside of marriage is wrong, and we would reject that out of hand anyway. So when you have Dr. Disrespect hitting on a minor, from a Muslim standpoint, that is wrong. Just because this is not in a marriage context, you're privately messaging someone, that's also ikhtilat. It's like inappropriate mixing of the genders. That's wrong. But so we have to disentangle age of consent versus age of marriage, first of all, because in the legal systems, according to international law even, these two things are separate. We're going to get into more of that detail in a minute. The second hypocrisy that SNEAKO points out is that, well, you have these other streamers Pokemon or Pokimane, who is a woman, and she knows that there are little boys who are pleasuring themselves watching her stream. So this is something, how is this not predatory behavior? How is this not creep behavior? That she is a streamer and she beautifies herself and makes herself attractive and she's monetizing it, and she knows that there are little kids, that's her main audience, who are pleasuring themselves. And she doesn't, have any problems with that. Her audience doesn't have any problems with that. That's not predatory. This seems like a pretty obvious double standard. And SNEAKO is absolutely right for pointing that out.
Age of consent and what he thinks it should be. He had a very bad debate where he could not answer where he thinks the law should set the age of consent to be.
Age of consent should be, SNEAKO?
This is not an important conversation.
No, you don't think kids are not as an important conversation? What do you think the age of consent should be? If you want to be consistent, you don't think anything updates, just tell us what you think it should be.
I think it should be past age, at a developed age, Dustin.
What is a developed age? If you had to set a law for it, what would you set it? What would you set it about?
It's a developed age.
And with all of this going on,
the irony of Destiny trying to push a Muslim on the age of consent when Destiny has multiple times made crude sexual remarks about minors, about child, CP basically, corn. Like, this is the moral authority on what is appropriate behavior with children or with minors. And we have a whole video that we've posted on Destiny's history making these kinds of crude remarks. But now he's like the moral standard to question SNEAKO on this.
He managed to get Penguin Zero, Moist Critical, or Charlie on a stream to debate him. Now, Charlie, as much of a fan of him as I have been in the past, did not perform amazingly in this debate. I think it's clear that he's not a very skilled debater, not his most amazing skill, but I don't really blame him for that because...
So it's so funny that the fanboys of Moist are saying, oh, you didn't really perform that well. That's an understatement. Moist got slammed. Moist was destroyed by SNEAKO. SNEAKO did a very good job of running circles around this guy. And the cope is from these people is that, oh, he's not really a debater. He's not a debater. SNEAKO is a debater. Like, is SNEAKO a professional debater? So this is how they are trying to get around the reality that their boy got crushed. Now, let me just say that I'm biased because I don't like this Moist Critical. His videos come up on my feed, and I don't know why they come up on my feed. YouTube seems to just be putting his stuff in my feed artificially, maybe. And he has these clickbait titles for his videos. Like, oh, this person got caught in the most shocking way or the weirdest way, or you won't believe what this, like a very clickbaity title and nothing to really indicate like what is the video about. And then you start watching his video and he just like leads you on. Like, you won't get right into it. He has to give like this monologue for 2 minutes. But it's just enough to like string you along so that you watch, and that engagement metric is huge. Like the first seconds, like 30 seconds watch time is huge in YouTube's algorithm. So he gets that, and then he like gives you bits and pieces of just some random viral clip that you could have watched on Twitter or you could have watched on LiveLeak or whatever website. But he is just reacting to this kind of viral footage, and he doesn't add anything to it. He doesn't add any substance, any analysis. He doesn't bring any kind of new information. So what is the value? Like, you can watch all his videos and you won't increase your knowledge of anything. It's just mindless entertainment. But it's even beyond mindless entertainment. Like someone like Mr. Beast, it's mindless entertainment, but there's a spectacle value. Like, oh wow, they're going to compete for $1 million, or they're going to compete for a Lamborghini. Like, okay, that's something that it's like spectacle. Like, there's something there. But Moist, he just sits at his desk and reacts to a video, and he makes some like derogatory remarks, or he's outraged. Like, it's basically outrage porn. Like, oh, this is so bad. This scammer is so bad. Can you believe what this scammer did? Oh, this child abuser. Oh, this is disgusting. Like, the most normie takes, the most uncontroversial takes on every subject. He will just regurgitate that, and then you'll see the video coming up in your feed. It's only been 5 hours published, and it already has 2 million views. So you're like, wow, 2 million views in 5 hours. There must be something there. And it's nothing. It's nothing. So I don't like this kind of content. I don't like this kind of, I feel it's like exploitative that he's putting out. But yeah, he's one of the most popular YouTubers with over 10 million subscribers. So... But as you can tell from this Tom Dark, he loves it. Tom Dark is like, yeah, he didn't perform well in this debate, but I usually like moist critical stuff.
The average person is not watching a lot of autistic debate content online. But regardless of how good or bad he is at this debate,
autistic debate content, he has to like put a jab against debate content. But like, I think this represents the mindset of a lot of simp type of attitudes. Like, it wasn't a formal debate that SNEAKO had with Moist Critical. It was just a conversation, a contentious conversation where you don't agree. So that is like autistic debate bro type of stuff. And that shows the mindset. Like, we don't like conflict. We don't like, people disagreeing on a controversial subject. We just want very simple moral prescriptions like, oh, scamming people is bad, and being dishonest is bad, and abusing children is bad. Like, yeah, we want outrage on that, and we just want to spam content on those kinds of topics. Making sure that women are empowered is good. We don't want to go beyond that. We don't want to have a debate or not even a contentious conversation. That becomes, you're an autistic debate bro if you care about those kinds of issues. So this is what creates an NPC culture, an echo chamber. This is why so many of these YouTubers are absolutely vacuous. Like, you don't get anything out of them other than just a repetition of standard talking points, a repetition of the establishment narrative on every single issue.
The stuff SNEAKO was trying to push in this debate was absolutely insane, and Charlie also was trying to push some really dumb shit, and I feel like I have to, call.
So SNEAKO is pushing something absolutely insane, and Moist is also pushing some dumb stuff. So the tweet here says, Moist Critical is arguing insane stuff for no reason here. No, it is not acceptable for a 9-year-old to get gender surgery. Feels like he is too worried about upsetting the queer mafia to the point of absurdity. So this is the backlash against Moist Critical, because even people who like him and they hate SNEAKO, they're jumping on him. Why? Because he said that, well, there's no problem if a 9-year-old or even younger wants to gender transition as long as the parents consent. No problem. They can get the hormone therapy or get the surgery. And SNEAKO does a great job of pushing on this point and getting it out of him, basically. And that has become the controversy where now a lot of people are canceling Moist Critical, which at some point they were calling the final boss of YouTube. The final boss. Like, he's such a moral authority. He's such like a beacon of moral insight, Moist Critical. And then he made this faux pas. He made this mistake of saying that, yeah, child gender transition or gender affirmation is perfectly legitimate and fine. Don't compare that to marriage. Marriage, on the other hand, will ruin your life. And there's a decision that no child can make, where we define child as being under 18.
Call it out a little bit here, because he said something here that is I'm just not cool with.
Oh, in the 1800s, when it was the age of 10, that was fine. Legally back then, they were not a pedophile. Today, legally, they are a pedophile.
Wait, when was the age of consent?
The thing that the conversation
Destiny has to fire up Wikipedia. Doesn't know that. Oh yeah, some places the age of consent is 10. Actually, that is, that's the de facto age of consent for the Western world. because there's no one preventing 10-year-olds from engaging in premarital sex. You know, you're a 10-year-old and you have a 11-year-old boyfriend. No objection to that. No one has a problem. So that means the age of consent is as low as 10 or even lower. The age of consent, and you see feminists and these liberal, left-wing, international human rights lawyers arguing that we don't want any age of consent. We want to abolish the age of consent. We want to keep the age of marriage at 18 or higher. But age of consent, yeah, as long as you're close within age range. That's what's important. You know, that's the most important thing. As long as it's just 1 year or 2 years, no problem. You can be 9 years old and be engaged in sex, involved in a sexual relationship with your loved one. You have to consent because you have rights. There's such a thing as adolescent rights. So let's look at some of those papers right here. So here's an article that was published in The Lancet, one of the top medical journals in the world. It's published in 2019. And the title is Protection versus Rights, Age of Marriage versus Age of Sexual Consent. So this is the distinction that you have to keep in mind. What's the age of marriage? What's the age of sexual consent? I explained that. And here are the authors, Suzanne Madhumita and Susan Sawyer. These are the authors. So here's the summary. It's worth reading in full. As many governments worldwide have raised the legal age of marriage to 18 years, some are also considering raising the age of sexual consent. Without close-in-age exemptions, arguments to align the legal age of sexual consent with that of marriage age would restrict the ability of adolescents to legally have sex. Oh no! In contrast to international agreements that affirm 18 years as the minimum age for consent to marriage, international human rights standards do not recommend specific age limits for sexual consent, but urge recognition of adolescents as rights holders, including rights in relation to sexuality. So we do recommend a minimum age of marriage. Minimum age of marriage has to be 18 or even older. Maybe we need to raise that. But age of consent, no. We do not recommend a specific limit for the age of consent. Why? Because adolescents have a right to be sexually active. You know, the 10-year-old, the 9-year-old, the little 5th grader, 4th grader, she has a right. She has a right to be sexually active and have a boyfriend. We need to have close in age exemptions. Obviously, they have to be close in age, but you know, that's it. That's it. Otherwise, we have no problem with these little kids. No. We don't use children in that context. We don't say children or kids. We say adolescents. When it's marriage, we call it child marriage. But we don't call it child sexuality. We call it adolescent sexuality. So how do they define adolescent? They have a definition here. Let's see. Adolescents as people aged 10 to 24 years. So children are people younger than 10 years old. Adolescents are aged 10 to 24 years. So when they talk about marriage, it's children. We don't want children to get married. That's child marriage. You're a child bride because you're under 18. But if it's just about sex, you know, just boyfriend and girlfriend or just a casual hookup, you know, just hooking up with, 10-year-olds just hooking up, no problem. As long as it's within close in age, that's important. You're adolescents. It's not child hookups, it's adolescent hookups. And that's important because adolescents have rights. Adolescents have rights. So let's continue reading that. Isn't this mind-blowing? So let's see. So adolescents are rights holders. You can't limit the right of adolescents to have sex. That's 10-year-old, according to their definition, as young as 10. The majority of the world's young people are having sex before the age of 18 years. The majority. So this is The Lancet published, the top medical journal. They're saying the majority under 18. So that's child sex. That's child sexuality. But they don't say child. Oh, the young people. The young people. That's when we talk about casual sex and hooking up. They're young people. They're not children. They're not kids. Laws that increase the age of sexual consent can be harmful and are often used to curb adolescents' agency, including denial of adolescents' rights to make decisions about whether, when, and with whom to have sex. Such laws can result in stigmatization or criminalization or both of individuals who have sex before marriage and increase barriers to accessing sexual and reproductive health. We wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want to stigmatize the 10-year-olds having sex. We won't want to criminalize that. God forbid. No, they should be very active if they want to be, if they consent. And they can consent to sex at 10 years old. This is what The Lancet has published and is saying. And this is also the standard that the United Nations takes, actually. By contrast, providing adolescents with appropriate information and services supports healthy development, agency, and empowerment around their rights, including the right to be informed about their bodies and the right to consent or not to sex. Okay, so, as long as it's safe sex, as long as we give them information so that they can practice their rights safely, no problem. But we say that, what about marriage? Like, can't you provide information about safe marriage? And then it'll be fine, for these adolescents to get married. Adolescent marriage, what's wrong with that? No. That's being a PDF. That's completely unacceptable. That's exploitation. That's evil, blah, 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 blah. Are you seeing like the blatant double standards here? Raising the legal age of sexual consent risks restricting adolescents from accessing the healthcare they need to protect themselves, and there's no evidence that it prevents consensual sex or sexual coercion, because the consideration to marry and to have sex are very different. The minimum ages need not be aligned. So if you raise the age of consent, that doesn't affect sexual coercion. It doesn't prevent any problems like that. So why even bother? Why even bother raising the age of consent? No, keep it minimal, or don't, as they said, we don't recommend any minimum. Do we not recommend any specific age limit for a minimum age of consent? That is the official, left-wing, democratic, secular, liberal position, and as published in The Lancet. So this article talks about different countries, because other countries are confused by this. You have countries, Muslim countries, some of these Christian countries in South America, that they say, well, wait a minute, we don't really accept or want adolescents to be having sex outside of marriage. That's not acceptable. So if we're going to increase the age of marriage, then we need to increase the age of consent as well to 18. And these feminists, part of these international feminist organizations, say, whoa. No, we want you to raise the age of marriage, but age of consent, don't raise that. That's a violation of adolescent rights. Isn't this mind-blowing to you? This is like such rank hypocrisy. And we see that, without any sense of irony. Anyway, let's go back to this. And then I have a lot more interesting information for you. So stay tuned. Keep watching.
Starts with, is critical, wondering why the age of consent is something that SNEAKO is so intent on debating, or why he has such an issue with the age of consent in general. Charlie says the age of consent should be an accepted number, meaning 18 years of age should be the age of consent, because when you're 18 years old and you're going to college, you can drive, you're doing very adult things, versus under that age, you're still a kid. SNEAKO then responds by saying that the age of consent in most states is not 18, which is true. About 30 states in the United States have the age of consent set to 16 years old. Charlie then says, well, yeah, but that mostly applies to Romeo and Juliet laws, like a 19-year-old dating a 16-year-old is legally not considered bad because obviously they're relatively close in age. And we can recognize that there are exceptions where somebody may be breaking the law, but it's not like a feel like act, right? SNEAKO then says he's...
Okay, yeah. So if it's, just a 16-year-old with a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old with an 11-year-old, that's not being a PDF. That's not being anything creepy or wrong. We can have exceptions for that. This is the nuance he was talking about earlier. He's nuanced.
He's not arguing to lower the age of consent. He's against the idea entirely. He then points out that in Europe, the age of consent is 16 in a lot of countries. In Brazil, it's 14 years old, I believe. He's basically saying that the law varies from place to place. So he asks Charlie why he believes 18 is the true age of consent to be respected. Charlie then brings up that just because it may be legal in some places, that doesn't mean it's right. SNEAKO responds by saying, okay, well, I wouldn't really do that. I wouldn't date someone that age. But it has nothing to do with their age. It's because he doesn't hook up with people anymore, and that's his greatest qualm about having sex with someone underage, that it's like out of wedlock. He then claims that even having an age of consent
that's like he just brushes it aside, like, oh, your biggest problem is that it's out of wedlock. Yeah, that is the big problem. That is the problem that Muslims have, and the majority of the world has, with the idea of teenagers being sexually active. That's out of wedlock. This is why, okay, let's look at this chart. So here is, Girls Not Brides. This is one of the NGOs, the Global Partnership to End Child Marriage. So then they make this distinction, just like we read about age of marriage versus age of sexual consent. And they say the exact same thing, that we want to raise the age of marriage, but age of consent should not be raised. Do not put a limit on when a person can be sexually active, because that's part of their rights, adolescent rights. If you're sexually active out of wedlock, you're an adolescent. If you get married under 18, then you're a child. This is the twisted way that they work. So you don't want to be you're girls, girls just want to have fun, right? Girls just want to have fun. That's their right. Don't try to tell your daughter that she has to get married to have be involved with a boy. No, that's her right. Who told you as a father that you can control your daughter, the sexuality of your daughter? How backwards and barbaric. She's empowered. She's empowered. Oh, is she empowered enough to be married? No. That's exploitation. You're exploiting a child if you get married. She's 13 years old and she gets married, you're exploiting her. But if she wants to get involved in group sex acts with her fellow 13-year-olds or 12-year-olds, well, no, that's her right. That's adolescent rights. Maybe she wants to experiment. Maybe she doesn't even know if she's straight or lesbian or trans. She doesn't know. She has to experiment. That's how you find out. She has that right. She's an adolescent, not a child. So look at the laws. So age of consent around the world. This is a useful chart. It's ageofconsent.net. So you can check that the colors are, over 19 years old is this darker green, and it goes all the way to must be married. So the red countries, red means bad, right? In the red countries, you have to be married. So countries like Saudi, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, Yemen, Qatar, etc., Libya, Sudan. There's no age, there's no minimum, because you must be married. Then 13 years old. So Japan is 13 years is age of consent. And then you have China is 14, Brazil is 14, Bolivia, you see a lot of South America, is around 14. And then you have 12 years old in Angola. In Niger is 13. Nigeria is 11. Burkina Faso is 13. Madagascar is 14. India is 18. Thailand is 15. Vietnam is 18. Anyway, you can browse this chart. And it's interesting how it varies. Amongst the states, it also varies. And Texas is 17. California is 18. New York is 18. 16. Ranges between 16 and 18, I think. Mexico is 18. So this is not enforced, because anyone who knows about American society, or the UK, for example, 16, these kids are sexually active under 16 or under 18. They can consent to be sexually active. It's not like the police is coming to the schools and saying, oh, you are a sexually active 15-year-old. The only problem is if the other party is over 18. The other party is over 18, then becomes statutory rape. This becomes statutory rape. It's a crime, but they have no problem with the actual sexual relationship if they're close in age. And this is the taboo. This is the taboo that we're trying to understand, and SNEAKO is trying to understand, and he's pressing Moist Critical to explain it, and Moist can't explain it, and this guy, Tom Dark, can't explain it either.
Encourages premarital sex somehow. So Charlie says, okay, would you marry a kid?
Okay, so then instead of let's take it away from like premarital sex. Would you feel comfortable marrying a 16-year-old? Like, would you meet a 16-year-old with romantic intent if you're in Europe and maybe marry a 16-year-old?
I wouldn't.
Nothing sexual.
I probably wouldn't personally, because I don't think that I'd be on the same mental playing field. I like to have intellectual conversations. I like to be with women that are around my same age.
So in his personal life, if he can, for some reason, understand that a 16-year-old is not the same thing as an 18, 19, 20-year-old in most cases, he can see that clearly. But then when it comes to applying it to other people, for some reason, he's like, oh, well, it's fine, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
I think there'd be too much of a gap. But other people, like, if they're able to get along, then I don't see why that's so much of a problem.
Well, the reason why it's a problem is because a 16-year-old does not have the same mental maturity as somebody who is, let's say, 26. They are vastly different at different stages in their life. The 26-year-old has had college, they've had jobs, they've had experiences far beyond the 16-year-old that makes them much more able to make informed decisions about their life.
So if it's mental maturity and experiences that determine what is actually moral versus immoral, then what if you have like a 20-year-old or say a 30-year-old who's like very low IQ, is very introverted, just stays in their mom's basement their whole life. And then you have like a very well-traveled 40-year-old or well-traveled 32-year-old and also higher IQ. So clearly these are two different people with vastly different IQ, vastly different experiences. So would it be exploitative or would it be something weird or wrong for these two to be in a relationship, whether married or not? If all, like, what determines what is appropriate or not is mental maturity or experiences, well, that doesn't seem to be tied necessarily to age. Those kinds of gradations and variances can exist at any age between two people. So, but you're not advocating any kind of legal rule on the basis of actual mental maturity. You're trying to justify the 18-year-old line, but you're doing just a very bad job of it because it doesn't make sense. You don't have any problem. Like, it doesn't seem like the problem that you really have is with mental maturity. So this is something that SNEAKO also points out, but just think about it. Like, what kind of explanation is this?
16-year-olds have had none of that. So I would say it's wrong to have sex with them if you're far older. Even if that 16-year-old may be physically mature, they're not mentally mature. It's as simple as that. And I think Charlie actually makes that point pretty well. But SNEAKO then starts digging into Charlie's ideology a bit. Charlie says that someone
and also, like, mental maturity, if mental maturity is what is required to be sexually active, you have plenty of under 18-year-olds who are sexually active. In the Lancet, we saw that the majority of in the world under 18 has had sexual experience. The majority. Are they, according to your definition, they're not mentally mature, but they are sexually active, usually with people who are in the same age group, or also teenagers or also adolescents. So those children are not mentally mature, but they're sexually active. You don't have any problem with that. You're not advocating a law against a 13-year-old hooking up with another 13-year-old. Neither of them are mentally mature, right? So if that is truly your problem, if that's the dividing line between moral and immoral, you're not consistently applying that standard. This is a point actually that I wish SNEAKO had made more of a big deal about. He doesn't really mention it in the debate, and he could have, I think, had a easy win on this point. And I bring it up in all my debates whenever these liberals or atheists or Christians bring up age of consent. I say, you don't have any problem with underage sex. You don't have any issue with it. You just have an issue with age discrepancy or an age difference, but the actual sex you don't have a problem with as long as they're close in age. So this is a taboo that you have that's not justified by any kind of rational reason or explanation.
Who is 17 years old and 364 days is a kid, but somebody who is 1 day older is automatically not a kid. And obviously, this is how we treat it legally sometimes, but practically speaking, a 1 day difference is not a huge change in maturity, right? And of course, the counter argument someone could make is, okay, well, let's say a 16-year-old is very smart. They've graduated college early. They drive a car. Would you say that you can just date them? And I would say no. But SNEAKO begins to catch.
Why? Isn't that a clear contradiction in your point? Like, okay, you have a very mature 17-year-old who can drive, who maybe has been accepted to college already, and you still think it's unacceptable morally, like you have moral qualms with that. Why? That contradicts the principle that you just gave us.
Charlie in some serious traps, and he doesn't do a good job of handling it.
You do admit that that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people graduate high
whole.
school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone is that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like a lot of the things you say, can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because I mean,
I don't think
your
anybody
clips
thinks
that
that.
I played in the video, you
There's
were
no
saying
way.
like the age of maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip.
So
like, for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become an adult, correct?
Yeah, legally.
So you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest to, like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
Now, for the purposes of
Moist keeps making this point throughout the debate that 18 is the commonly accepted age. 18 is the most people will accept 18, but we just saw like that's actually not the case. Like when you look at the entire world, 18 is not the number. A lot of countries are at 18. Other countries are much lower. So China is 14. China and India is the most populous nation at this point, I think, but China is a close second. Over 1 billion people. 14 is the age of consent. Russia is at 16. So what are you talking about? The most people agree at 18. This is completely false. Even today, even right now, even in the U.S., it's there are many states, as was mentioned, maybe 30, that it's under 18 as the age of consent, let alone age of marriage. So this is some falsehood that is repeated by NPCs that has absolutely no basis in fact. Now, let's just take a pause here to look at super chats because I'm really interested in what you guys think of all this. So I'll read the super chats, especially the ones that are related. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Appreciate it, Gabe's World. Really generous of you. This money is illegal. I don't know what that means. Assalamu alaikum, Daniel. How do we solve the men's issue crisis, loneliness, male suicide, simping? I'll be a father or a daughter in a few months. How do I protect her from feminism? Greetings from Turkey. Rolex Kali is the best. I don't know who that is. Appreciate the super chat, brother. Wa alaikum assalam. So How do you prevent your daughter from being influenced by feminism? The answer is the main factor, I would say, is make sure that you don't put her in a schooling system that promotes feminism. Now, if you're in Turkey, I don't know if you have any options for that. If they are teaching feminism, they won't say that, oh, we have a course titled feminism or here's the feminism textbook, but underlying ideas of feminism, of equality of the genders, there's no such thing as gender roles, etc., etc. Those are taught in schools. If you have no choice but to send her to those schools, then counter that messaging. Explain how in Islam we do have gender roles. Allah has created men and women different with different roles. And it's important. What's your goal as my daughter? What's your goal as a woman and a slave of Allah? Your goal is to be a mother, to be a wife, to raise children, like this kind of message, and really connect her to older generations, older generations, grandmothers, great-grandmothers. So she has that positive influence, and she sees around her the role of women in a traditional role. Shield her from some of these feminists, some of these empowered women that are antagonistic to gender roles. They're antagonistic to Islam, and they want to liberate women and empower them. Avoid those types of influences for your daughter, and may Allah protect you always and your family. Am I planning to react to the Paris opening ceremony? Maybe. It was quite disturbing, and they ultimately deleted the opening ceremony because there was so much backlash. It's quite funny. Please explain why there are so many Jews going against Israel, chanting Free Palestine. Are they trying to fool us, or they do have a different agenda? They do have a different agenda. There are many Jews who are against what Israel is doing. They're against genocide. They're against terrorism. These are Jews who have spoken out against Israeli ethnic cleansing, and they oppose that, and they say Free Palestine. So those Jews who do that, we consider that a good action, and we should support them saying that because they're getting backlash from their own community. And I've always said that Jews who are speaking out against the occupation and apartheid and genocide, they are really doing some kind of heroic activism, and we appreciate those Jews. And I've mentioned their names many times. People online right now, for example, I was just retweeting Max Blumenthal, and he has a website, Gray Zone Journalistic Endeavor. He reports on a lot of great stuff that shows the evil that Israel is doing. Max Blumenthal is Jewish. So this is, I don't think he's like trying to fool anyone. That's what he actually believes. So, okay, let's get back to the reaction.
Of preventing child abuse and a whole host of other issues, I agree that 18 should be the age of consent, because the problem you can run into if you get rid of that is that you can begin to justify a whole list of other horrible things. SNEAKO makes the argument that the law should just be abolished entirely, which is just fucking stupid. That's wrong. Typically, people do a good job of governing themselves and regulating their behavior. That's why not everybody walking out on the street is in jail right now. But when someone does not and they harm someone else, the government exists in this case to step in and prevent that harm or punish the harm perpetuating it, so it sets an example to others that they cannot partake in that harm. The government is not always right. There's a lot of bad shit they do, but in an ideal society, this is why they exist. There needs to be some kind of rule to the land, because people on their own cannot govern themselves sometimes because they're stupid. And the law especially needs to exist when it comes to children and exploitation. Children are literally the most sacred thing we have as a society, okay? They are literally the future of our world. The things they do now and the ideas they learn, the experiences they have will in the future change the world, okay? And their children will change the world after we are dead. Before they're even able to be adults, we should not be letting them be abused by people who should know better when they're powerless to stop it and can't understand the ramifications of theirs and others' actions. But SNEAKO.
All right, so when it comes to children being sexually active, this can also be very harmful. There's a lot of harm that comes from being sexually active especially out of wedlock, boyfriend, girlfriend. A lot of harm comes from that. A lot of depression comes from that. Well, by your logic, there needs to be government and intervention, because people sometimes make decisions and they don't realize that the decision that they're making is harmful. So that could be with children and their parents. Their parents are enabling this kind of behavior. They're promoting girlfriend, boyfriend. They're promoting their daughters to go out wearing all kinds of inappropriate clothing. Even I mentioned the example of cheerleading, for example, or girls sports, girls swimming, where your little girl is dressed in a very provocative way, and there's other boys, which is bad enough, but even men who can look at her and ogle her, and that you have no problem with that. In school or in school context, you have no problem with that. So isn't that harmful? Isn't that potentially going to cause exploitation? Exploitation doesn't have to be like, oh, there's a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old who is involved with a minor. Exploitation can be, oh, there's a 15-year-old exploiting a 13-year-old. And now with technology and video, you can have video on your phone, you can take pictures on your phone. There's so many examples of children, adolescents, teenagers who are exploiting each other. You have this sexting phenomenon. You have this revenge porn phenomenon where boys are taking videos, or other girls are sharing videos of different sexual acts, sexual behaviors, and they're sharing it. They're putting it online. And this has become such an epidemic that even in the US, the Department of Homeland Security is involved. DHS is involved. The feds, because it is such a widespread problem. Isn't this harmful? They don't say that, oh, well, I guess we have to put a standard in place that children should not be sexually involved under a certain age. That's not their solution. Their solution is say, oh, we have to just teach about the dangers and we have to make sure things are safe. We have to teach safe sex or safe sexting. Like, that's their solution, because it would be too controversial to restrict the rights of children, or adolescents, to be sexually active and to sext each other, etc. And this is a big issue. This is a big issue in terms of children amongst each other. And then also you have schools, the school system, where teachers are constantly getting caught having sexual relationships with their students. And there's always people like these liberals or the NPCs always point out the Catholic Church. But there's this article from CBS News, for example, has media ignored sex abuse in school. And this article cites or makes a very interesting citation. The Catholic Church, you think that the Catholic Church has a problem? The physical sexual abuse of students in schools is likely 100 times the abuse by priests. And this is just a matter of numbers. First of all, there's just a lot more kids in public school than going to church, but 100 times more when it comes to teachers that will be in sexual relationships with their students. The vast majority do not get caught and are not exposed. So this is, where are all of the advocates of public education now? Where are these morality police when it comes to marriage, when it comes to Islam, for example? Where are they in terms of talking about a crackdown that needs to happen on public schools? We need to have a revamp. This is a crisis. Look at the kinds of the activism that was directed against the Catholic Church to revamp the Catholic Church, to root out this kind of problem. There are documentaries made. There are movies made. This is a terrible disaster of child exploitation. And it is, it is quite evil and disgusting. But what about these public schools where it's 100 times worse? Now, is it 100 times worse per capita, or is it just quantitatively 100 times worse? Either one is really bad. But where's the documentaries? Where's the movies? Where is this discussed as like a crisis, like a national crisis? No one cares. No one, there will be an article here and there reporting, oh, another teacher was caught, and it's presented like it's just a individual problem. Oh, that person was a perv. Like that one teacher was perverted. It's not a systematic problem. This is not like a systematic issue that we have to address. With the Catholic Church, it's a systematic issue. We have to take the Catholic Church to task. They're covering things up. But when it comes to public schools, oh, it's just one, bad apple. One bad apple who preyed and exploited the 15-year-old boy. Usually it's boys and female teachers. So the hypocrisy just piles on and on and on.
SNEAKO then brings up in the 1800s, we did this.
Right, 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of marriage.
Yeah, but we can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we play by those rules? Because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying
We're so much more advanced. We're so much more evolved. Didn't you know that? We're just like 1800s. That was 200 years ago, right? They're in caves at that point, right? 200 years ago, they were just discovering the wheel. They're discovering fire. We're so much more evolved. Like, why? Why is that? The whole point of citing the historical consensus where age of consent and age of marriage was under 18, sometimes even no age of limit when it comes to marriage, is to show how arbitrary the 18 line is. It's arbitrary. This is like an arbitrary taboo that has no justification. Like, that's the point that SNEAKO is making. Like, why is it the case that the majority of the world now and the majority of the world in the past, they would not agree with this 18 limit that you've set? They would not agree with it. They would not agree with this 18 line as the definition or the dividing line between what makes a child versus what makes an adult. They wouldn't agree with that. So that should bring you pause. That should make you reflect and think that, maybe this taboo that I have as defined by the 18 age limit, maybe that's just arbitrary. Maybe that's just a product of my local circumstance, the status quo where I am in this point in history, in this geographic location, and it's not a universal law that I have to force everyone to abide by. Moist never has that kind of insight or that kind of light bulb moment, and neither do the NPC followers that he has in general. They never stop to think that, wait, maybe this taboo is just it's a taboo. It's not based on a kind of rational deliberation or clear reasons. And therefore, it's questionable. Therefore, I should maybe be more open to other possibilities. So this is, it's very NPC-like. It's like you can't think outside of the programming. Like in certain cultures, you have all kinds of taboos. Like one taboo is in certain cultures, like there's a certain South Asian tribe in Asia, and maybe there's a South American tribe. They have a taboo where if you are pregnant or you are on your period, you cannot eat fish. Eating fish is seen as something so disgusting and vile, and it is prohibited. And the people, like, if you tell them or they hear about a woman who is on her period eating fish, like, they have a visceral disgust reaction to it, like, oh, that is really nasty. That's really, like, what? This is unacceptable. They react in the same way as Charlie does, or Moist does, when he thinks about, a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old getting married. But we would tell the people with this fish taboo that, look, this is just a taboo. There's no logical reason for why you think it's so wrong, why you think it's so evil. And as evidence, look at all of these countries, look at all of these people, past and present, who have no problem with women on their periods eating fish. This is something just specific to you. This is something just specific to your culture. It's a cultural taboo. And that's how we would explain it, to like say that, okay, well, you should be open to the fact that there are other possibilities. It would be weird for you to look at the entire world and see all of these people eating fish when they're on their period or when they're pregnant and think that they're making some kind of moral violation, like a universal, a moral violation that violates universal values. That would seem weird. That would seem bizarre. That's the kind of conversation that SNEAKO is trying to have with Moist, and Moist is just not getting it, and his NPC followers just can't get it. Because the 18-year-old taboo, it's exactly the same thing. Now, someone can respond and say, well, what about incest? You know, incest is also a taboo, and they've done this experiment. Like, they've asked people in the West, in the United States, for example, in Europe, well, if you have two brothers and they have this kind of attraction and they want to be sexually involved with each other, or a brother and sister that use protection, like, what's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with that? And liberals will have a hard time trying to explain what is actually wrong with incest. If you take out the reproductive factor and the potential for birth defects, what is actually wrong? And one researcher who did this is Jonathan Haidt. He did this. He has a research paper on this that was published on this incest taboo. And what he realizes is that Westerners have a really difficult time. They disagree with incest. Mostly, they say, yeah, I feel icky about it. I think it's wrong, but I don't know why. I can't give a justification. I can't give a reason. So is the incest taboo the same as like this under 18 taboo? I would say no. Why? Because the incest taboo is something universal. The incest taboo is something universal because it doesn't come from just your culture. It comes from human biology. It's biologically rooted. That's why you see cultures that are separated in terms of time and space. They haven't interacted with each other. They're not independent. They're independent. They're not influencing each other. They have the same exact incest taboo. So that shows that it's about biology. It's not about culture. But when it comes to the under 18 taboo, and that's the definition of what is a child versus what is an adult, that only exists in the West. It only exists in in certain states of the United States, in the Western culture, and cultures that have been impacted or influenced by the West. But if you take away that influence of modern Western culture, then there's no taboo. There's no universal taboo about like a 30-year-old marrying a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old. There's no taboo like that. It's only in this particular culture. So that tells us that it's not biologically rooted. It's not something universal. It's something that is a parochial, arbitrary taboo in one particular culture. Why should we respect that? Why should we think that this is a universal value that we all have to bow down to? And this is what none of these people can actually, none of these NPCs, whether they're atheists, whether they're Christian, whether they're Jewish, they can't cope with this fact. And no matter how many times you try to explain it, they can't go beyond the programming. So, what are you guys saying in the chat? Oh, there's some super chats here. Let's see. Y10 says, keep the good stuff up. Appreciate it, Y10. That's very generous. Super chat from you. And I reacted to that. Okay. Ish says, I'm 31 and my wife is 33. We are blessed. Well, I don't know, Ish, because does she have the same amount of experiences as you do? Is she mentally mature at your mental maturity level? That's a big age gap. Are you sure you're not a PDF? So, yeah, guys. I hope you're enjoying this approach to the stream, and you're getting value out of it. So if you do, just put a thumbs up in the chat, or make sure to like the video and share it. So we're just getting started. This is another thing that I want to show you. It's from Pew. Many countries allow child marriage. Are you seeing this? Many countries allow child marriage. This is the Pew Research Center. Almost all of the world's nations have laws specifying what age a couple can marry. And in most of these countries, those under the age of 18 are allowed to wed. So in most countries, under 18, you can get married. Indeed, at least 117 nations, including the US, allow children to marry according to a new Pew Research Center analysis of data in 198 countries and territories from the United States Department and the US State Department and the UN, the United Nations. So 117, the majority allow child marriage. You know, they call it child marriage because they're against it. So when they're for some sexual behavior, they say adolescent. But if it's marriage, it's child marriage. So that's the consensus. The majority, I should say, not the consensus. The majority say, yeah, you're under 18, you can't get married. And there's a nice, helpful chart here. The U.S., you can see countries where there is an exemption. If you're under 18, under 18-year-olds can get married. Australia here. Malaysia, Japan, China is no exception. Interesting. India is no exception, or there's no data or no exemption. So, yeah. So if you're a Muslim, then this is like the opinion of the world. We are with the rest of the globe on this issue. SNEAKO is with the rest of the globe on this issue. And Moist and other Western NPCs, they just can't fathom it. They just can't understand. And they just repeat the same false claim that the majority agrees that 18 is the line. The majority agrees that 18 is the line. No, sorry. Actually, it's the opposite. The majority have exemptions, legal exemptions for marriage. And we're not even mentioning the age of consent. Even age of marriage, they allow under 18. And the majority, just as a statistical fact, under 18 have been sexually active, according to the Lancet.
You're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10 and the U.K. was 7. Right? So if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, then the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college. They don't leave the house until this age. Their brains don't develop until they're 25. Your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money. They're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you could use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
I think that'd be totally understandable. Like, I think that's fine.
So then does that make anybody who sleeps with an under 25-year-old, does that now make them a pedophile?
No, I don't.
Bravo, SNEAKO. SNEAKO, mashallah, like he's just like a maestro. He's just directing this conversation in an expert way, mashallah. And he's not a professional debater. But he's just getting him on every single point. Okay, if maturity is the line, mental maturity, well, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until 25 or later on average for most people. What if the age of marriage or the age of consent is raised to 25? Would you agree with that? And then Moist just bites the bullet. So he bites the bullet. And then SNEAKO very intelligently says, okay, you're biting the bullet. So what are the implications of biting the bullet? By your standard, anyone who's sexually involved under 25 is a PDF. So what does Moist say to that?
I don't think necessarily that makes them retroactive.
So then what's a...
But it's an
Okay, so it doesn't make... So he doesn't realize the contradiction that he just made. He doesn't realize, because the contradiction is that it's not about retroactive. Like, you are 24 years old and you're sexually active with a 30-year-old. That, according to the new definition, is a violation of statutory rape. SNEAKO is saying, well, would you consider that to be PDF? And then Moist can't answer the question. He has to flub it, or he has to fudge it and say, oh, I don't agree with retroactive. Like, it has nothing to do with retroactive pronunciations of whether you're a PDF.
It's an accepted definition of 18 for a long time.
But this is where Charlie really starts to lose me.
So he loses everyone here.
25 years old being the age of consent would be dumb. It just would be. And you should not be okay with the government.
Why? Why would it be dumb? it's based on the idea of mental maturity. So standards can change, society can change. Maybe in the future it's realized that 18 years of schooling, or not 18, but 12 years of schooling, like elementary school, middle school, and high school, that's not enough. You need 16 years, 17 years of mandatory schooling because you're not mentally mature. You can't be an adult until you go through that. So then they raise the age of consent to 25. That's the same exact logic that is being used for 18. So how does it not make sense to raise the age of consent to 25? It's the exact same logic.
Government raising the age of consent to 25, and now if you're 30 and you bang someone who's 24, you're now a creep legally. You shouldn't be charged for that. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense, guys. So this is the, you can see like the NPC-ness, that being a bot, like you can see that like in this kind of response. He can't really think like, why would it be wrong? It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Like, and he leaves it at that. He just leaves it at that, and there's no further explanation. How is this like these people who are so evolved, you know, we've evolved so much over 200 years. Like, we're so much more rational. We're so much more moral than people of the past. But you can't even express like a argument. You can't express reasons and give like a systematic argument for your position. You just resort to, well, it doesn't make sense. That's just an assertion. You're just asserting that in the most reactionary way. It's like you're saying, you're just reiterating the status quo without further comment. Like, how can anyone respect that?
The appeal to whatever the law says being right and true is dumb, because obviously there should be a law in place, but that being the only thing that your morality rests on is retarded. There are laws that have existed in the past that will exist in the future that are dumb, and I don't care about breaking them. If you're going to defend a certain law, you should be able to justify why you defend that law. And the idea that because the law says it, it's true is dumb. But then Charlie comes back and really tries to...
Well, why can't you defend, like, that's the whole point that SNEAKO is making. Defend the law that says 18. And Moist and Tom, they give a reason. They say, well, 18 is when, you know, you're generally mentally mature and you have experiences or whatever. That's why 18 is justified. And SNEAKO is countering. He has a counter argument. It says, well, you know, actual full mental maturity is not reached in terms of your brain physiology, maturation of the prefrontal cortex. That doesn't happen until 25. So if that really is the defining thing dividing you from childhood to adulthood, then what if we raise the age of consent to 25? And then you don't have any response to that. So what are the reasons? Like, your laws should be based on reasons. Okay, what are they? You haven't provided any.
See how low SNEAKO will go.
Do you see why this is like a weird take to have though? Like I don't think you're coming at this from a place.
It's weird. It doesn't make sense. Like, all you're saying is like, this is not the status quo. This is not what the programming says. That's what, when he says that this is weird or this doesn't make sense, you can translate that NPC lingo to normal human language, and it's like, this is not my programming. This is not my programming. Therefore, I reject it.
Place of you wanting to f a 15-year-old, are you? Like, to go back to that question, is 12 too young? Do you think 12 is too young?
I think 12 is too young for me.
For you? So you wouldn't be upset if you found out that a 20-year-old banged a 12-year-old for any reason other than the fact it's out of wedlock. You wouldn't be like, that's messed up? If a 20-year-old married a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, you wouldn't say that's messed up? SNEAKO just spent a lot of time rightfully...
Like, would you say that a 12-year-old hooking up with a 13-year-old is messed up? Like, would you say that that's... Do you have any problem with that? That's happening. Like, a 12-year-old is a 7th grader. So a lot of these people, they don't understand. Like, it's like they have wiped their memories of what life was like when they were 10 years younger or 20 years younger. Like, do you remember 12 years old? You were in either 6th or 7th grade. I remember, like, if I make an effort, I can remember. And there were a lot of sexually active kids in 6th and 7th grade in public schools. And the way that the girls were dressed and what the boys and the girls were talking about in 6th and 7th grade, it was a lot of sexual behaviors. Like, these aren't little kids playing with Legos and dolls at 12 years old. So do you have a problem with a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, for example, or two 12-year-olds or two 11-year-olds? Like, do you have a moral problem with that? If you do, like, if the issue is being sexually active when you're not mentally mature, if that really is your problem, then you should be just as disgusted and find it just as wrong, morally wrong, for two 12-year-olds to be sexually involved as like a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old to be involved. If that really is your problem. But it's not. That's why you don't even mention it. That's why you haven't even considered it.
Calling out Chris Tyson for being a horrible person. Chris didn't even bang a 12-year-old. Is what Chris did only bad because it's out of wedlock? I'm sensing some serious inconsistency here. But SNEAKO then decides to bite the bullet and
that is like, what's seriously wrong is the exploitation. What's seriously wrong is a streamer, a popular streamer, just messaging these adolescents and trying to coax them into this kind of act, a sexual act. Like, that is creepy and bad. And we say this as Muslims because the proper channels for a relationship is marriage. Marriage where there is involvement of the father, there is involvement of the family, and it's something that is done in the light of day. It's not in these chats behind closed doors. Like, that is what is disgusting. That is what is creepy. That is what is exploitative, and we condemn that. But don't try to project that onto the institution of marriage that has been practiced in all of these cultures, not just Muslim cultures, Christian cultures, Hindu cultures, Buddhist cultures, in Japan, in China, in India, in Africa, etc., etc., etc. So don't conflate these things. And SNEAKO does a good job of trying to pull these things apart. Like, he says that, no, my problem is with the hooking up.
Finally say that 12 is too young, which, I mean, thank God he did that.
I think 12 is too young for me. Yes.
Well, for you, do you think 12 is too young in general? I feel like that should be an easy answer.
12 is too young in general, correct? Because,
Okay.
yes.
And I don't think you're
I want
coming at
to
this from that
define,
angle.
but what you're saying, your definition of adult is not even the actual definition. Do you know what the definition of child is? Like, anybody watching this can Google it. You can Google it too. The definition of child is somebody who has not reached puberty yet. That's the definition.
Yeah, and then you get into like the abibophile or whatever as opposed to file, and those are all. Like,
I don't know. I have no idea what those terms are. I don't know what that is, but I'm saying that's the actual definition. When somebody reaches maturity, it's based off of biological and physical maturity.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
So it varies for everybody. Adulthood is not something that you can set in stone because it's different for the entire world. Right? I moved out when I was 14. A lot of people don't move out until they're 25. I went through puberty when I was 17. A lot of people went through puberty when they were 13, 14, 15. It changes for everybody. So for you to say that this is the set in stone age and say you're a pedophile if it's under 18, and then if you're over 18, you're fine. Well, then that's a weird line that doesn't make sense. So you're going to say this person is a terrible person if they're 17 years old, 364 days, and right after that, they're good to go. But it changes for everybody. So we have to have something, a definition. We have to be realistic with everybody. Well, we don't. But you're saying we, but that's not even the case in the country we live in.
And while people do mature at different rates, and I would not call someone who is 18 and dates a 16-year-old creepy in any way, the reason that the law exists...
Why? Why not? The 16-year-old is not mentally mature. 16-year-old is 16. That's child. So it's like a adult with a child. According to your definitions, according to Moist, that is being a PDF. See, the inconsistent.
This is to make it legally enforceable to punish scenarios like I mentioned before, where a 26-year-old sleeps with a 16 or 15-year-old or 14-year-old or 13-year-old, right? That's why the law exists, to punish those people. That is bad, and it should be punished, and there's no excuse for it, whether they're married or not. And if you do something like that, the...
Why? Why, if they're married, is that bad? He just asserts his position, asserting the status quo, asserting this NPC programming. Why is that bad? The 16-year-old is sexually active in society. The 16-year-old in society today Many of them, not all, but a significant proportion are sexually active, and the culture is perfectly fine with it. NPCs like this guy and Moist are perfectly fine with it. And they are not saying that, well, high schools really need to shut down prom, and high schools really need to shut down dating, and high schools need to really make sure that kids aren't on the internet where they can consume pornography and they can send videos to each other. Like that kind of childhood sexuality is perfectly accepted, if not promoted. But these NPCs have nothing to say about that. So you don't have a problem with a 16-year-old being sexually active. You don't have a problem with a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old being sexually active. Now, a lot of people don't know the actual history, or the actual biology, I should say, of puberty. So puberty takes between 2 to 5 years. SNEAKO correctly mentioned that it's not like one simple age where everyone hits puberty. It's a range. And there are these things called the Tanner stages of puberty. So there are 5 Tanner stages. This is for females. So it talks about like the signs of puberty at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and then the final stage is stage 5. Stage 4 is the period. Stage 4 is menarche. And that is at the end of the puberty process. Is stage 4. That's when you are able to reproduce at stage 4. At stage 5, there's more hair that spreads. There's fat that fills out the hips and the breasts. But in terms of the development and the changes of the internal organs, that is finished at stage 4, Tanner stage 4, and that is when the period happens. So people have this mistaken understanding that the period actually happens at the beginning of puberty. No, it actually happens at the end, the penultimate stage of puberty. And after that, the majority of the growth has already completed, the growth and the development at when the period happens at stage 4. Now, if you look at, here's another article from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the National Institutes of Health, where they define the onset of puberty, the time in life when a person becomes sexually mature, typically occurs between ages 8 and 13 for girls and 9 and 14 for boys. So the typical age is between 8 and 13. Now we go to more specific data. Let me expand this. So the cumulative probability of menarche, so having your period by age, and it goes like a racial breakdown, but it starts with a total at the top line. So 1% at age 8 have their period of females. So that means they have almost completed puberty by age 8. 1% of women today. 4% by age 9. 10% by age 10. 1 out of 10. So 10 years old is elementary school. This is 4th and 5th grade. They are now almost at the end of puberty for girls. 10%. And this is important to understand. Like, they're sexually mature. They start having sexual desire. They start getting interested in the opposite sex, etc. That happens at 4th grade for 10% of girls. At age 11, 26%. At age 12, 53%. 53%. Age 12 is 6th and 7th grade. Half of girls. Okay, so these aren't girls that are just playing with dolls. These aren't girls that are, sitting and having a tea party. They're active. Again, think back. If you're in public schools, in the US especially, or in Europe, you went to public school like I did. What were the 7th grade girls doing? What were the 7th grade girls talking about? They're actually getting ready for the dance like that would happen every few months. The school dance, picking out dresses, trying to look as provocative as possible. This is unfortunately what boys have to go through. They're locked in these prisons of public schools with the opposite sex. and they're constantly being titillated, these 12-year-old boys, by the opposite sex, by these girls. That's the reality that we just want to ignore. 13-year-olds, 77% have already hit their period. That means they're almost done with puberty. Okay, so this is way before age 18. This kind of biological reality, these NPCs are completely ignorant of. And what makes it worse is that they talk about it like they know what they're talking about.
Vast majority of people in the United States will see you as a creep. And that's not just because it's illegal. It's because they recognize the vast difference on average between a 26-year-old and a 16-year-old.
So again, an NPC talking point. Like, the vast majority of people see it. Like, instead of giving reasons, like an independent mind, like this is the reason this makes sense or why this is correct, he just appeals to what the majority think. Like, most would see this as problematic. Most would see this as wrong. This is NPC thinking.
This is a pretty easy thing to adhere to. You can just not bang kids when you're in your mid-20s. It's not that difficult. You can not marry one when you're in mid-20s. It's that simple. They meander around a bit. SNEAKO is arguing that sex out of wedlock shouldn't happen, but if you marry a 15-year-old and they're mature for their age, that's fine. Like, the idea that a 20-year-old banging an 18-year-old is worse than a 20-year-old banging a 13-year-old because one of them is out of wedlock is so retarded. This guy's a fucking moron. But
yeah, again, like, he's just reasserting his claim, like, oh, this is so stupid, this is so disgusting, this is, yeah, but why? It's just everyone agrees, yeah, but why? Oh, this is something known, this is common, yeah, but why? Oh, this is outrageous, this is disgusting, and around we go. And that's why, you know, that's the majority of the SNEAKO versus Moist debate. Moist just is on a loop repeating the same point that, well, everyone agrees. That's why I didn't like go through every minute of that debate, because it just gets repetitive.
But Charlie brings it back once again to SNEAKO's personal beliefs around the subject.
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for, I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore, anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Well, because the government is right sometimes, actually. Sometimes people
appeal to authority. The government is right. Okay, well, why are they right on this particular issue when you also recognize that the government is sometimes wrong?
People do dumb stuff. Sometimes people do evil stuff. If someone wants to kill someone else,
what's dumb and evil about the scenario that SNEAKO mentioned? What's dumb and evil about it? Please explain.
Why should we let the government get involved? Well, because murder is wrong. If the person being murdered consents to it, if they want to die and want to allow another person to kill them, we should just let it happen, right? I mean, they're consenting. No, of course not, because there is an inherent harm in the action of taking someone's life. You are letting a person who is clearly mentally effed up in the head die because they have no will to live. And you're
well, that's the law in Canada. In Canada, euthanasia is legal. Have you heard of that? You can, like, if a person decides in medically assisted, you know, taking your own life, that is legal in Canada. And a lot of liberals have argued this for decades, that taking your own life, it's your life. You should be able to do whatever you want with it. It's your body. You should be able to do whatever you want with it. Don't you agree? You know, or do you think there's some kind of metaphysical value to life and that you don't actually own your own body and you have to be committed to this metaphysical value? Like religious people, like Muslims, for example, taking your own life is haram. It's wrong. It's immoral. It's punished in the afterlife. So now you're starting to sound like a religious person. I thought everybody has their own choice to do whatever they want with their own body. But euthanasia is legal in Canada, and they're trying to push for it to be legal in the entire world as a human right. As a human right. If you want to go, that's your choice. That's your choice, not God's choice, not your family's choice, not your children's choice, not your spouse's choice. That's your choice, your body, your choice. So now he's breaking rank with the liberal consensus.
Allowing a sick person to murder them. That is wrong. You cannot reasonably consent to being killed.
Why not?
Just like you can't reasonably consent to having sex as a child. And this is such an easy thing to understand. And as for the argument of parents,
you can consent to having sex as a child with other children, with other teenagers, with other adolescents. And you also said you had no problem with a 16-year-old getting with an 18-year-old. The 16-year-old is a child, as far as you've defined it. So you actually don't have a problem with 16-year-olds being sexually active.
Allowing it. Yeah, some parents are morons. Some parents will allow their child to be exploited by an adult, but just because they don't think that there's anything wrong doesn't mean we shouldn't set societal standards or have a kind of law in place so that enforcers can punish that person and stop the harm from taking place. SNEAKO himself may not be molesting kids, but he is arguing.
Where's the harm? What is the harm of a 20-year-old being with a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old or whatever? Where's the harm? The harm, you've only gestured towards a difference in mental maturity, but I don't see how that can be harmful, because even two people who are in their 30s might be vastly different in terms of mental experience or IQ, yet we would have no problem with them getting married. Or how about like an 80-year-old rather, who's senile, an 80-year-old who is going through dementia? Are they not allowed to get married to someone who is more mentally aware, more mentally healthy? Like, should we also prohibit that? Is that also a outrageous morally, like a morally outrageous act? See, these are the things that don't compute. They don't match up. When you express this kind of moral outrage, like, oh, the adult over 18 getting with a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old, this is disgusting. Like, that kind of moral outrage needs to be justified with reasons, or it should be something universal, like a universal disgust reaction. But it's neither of those things. So this is what doesn't match. You have this severe moral outrage, but you don't have any kind of justification. And it seems like the whole law or the whole dividing line is arbitrary. It's arbitrary. It's a number that you've just selected. So how can you be so worked up about an arbitrary rule? That's what doesn't compute. That's the contradiction that none of these NPCs are able to explain. Because if someone is like really worked up about a pregnant woman eating fish, or a woman on her period eating fish, they're really like, oh, this is so disgusting. Like, we would just chalk that up to an ingrained taboo. Like, this is just a really culturally ingrained taboo, because this is not universal, and it's not something that's justified by any kind of reasoning, like consequentialist reasoning or deontological reasoning, moral reasoning. So why? Why do you have this kind of strong reaction? You just chalk it up to a cultural taboo. Like, that's the only way that we would explain it when it comes to an arbitrary rule. Like, why fish? Like, why fish? Why not chicken? Why not beef? Why not wheat or grains and bread? Like, it's only fish that you can't eat when you're on your period? Like, why? It seems very arbitrary. In the same way that 18, why 18? Why not 17? Why not 25? Why not 12? Why not 13? Why not 14? It seems like an arbitrary line that you've drawn. SNEAKO's definition, or SNEAKO's dividing line, makes a lot more sense. Like, a dividing line based on maturity, something that's physical. You've physically changed. You're like physically able to have sexual relations. You're physically able, like your hormones have changed. Your physical body has changed. You're no longer prepubescent. So that is a physical dividing line. That makes a lot more sense. And that's what most of the religions of history have had as their dividing line. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, etc. They've all had that as a general guideline for when it is appropriate to get married. And even outside of those three religions, cultures generally look at a physical indicator of when you should get married or when you are mature enough to be sexually involved. That is SNEAKO's definition. It makes a lot of sense. You can explain it. And also, by the way, limiting it to an arbitrary number, for most of history, there wasn't really a birth certificate or like a very clear way to know what is my age. I generally know I'm like a teenager. Like I've been alive for over 10 years. I've been alive for over 15 years. But am I 14 or am I 15? Exactly what is my age? That's not necessarily well defined in all cultures, especially cultures that don't have written language. But they still had a dividing line between childhood and adolescence or adulthood. Because it's something physical, it's something objective. Whereas the age is not something that's always recorded or is well known for a person. So how can you have a legal system that will punish people based on that number that there's no accounting of? Like there's no record. Like the police can't go and say, oh, let's see the birth certificate. You got married to this child. Let's look at the child's birth certificate and see if this is allowed, if this is legal or not. Oh, you're actually in violation because their birth certificate shows that she's 1 year younger than the appropriate age. Like that's not possible. You have to have something that's very apparent and physical, which is the physical bodily maturity.
Arguing for some horrible shit right now, and he needs to be called out for that. He's sounding more and more like Amos Yee every day.
If everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed.
Yeah, wait. So he sound like, I don't know who Amos Yee is, maybe some other YouTuber, but how is CP? SNEAKO is talking about marriage again, and you are bringing up like someone involved in pornography. Like how is those are two completely opposite things. Sexuality through marriage versus exploiting children through pornography. So the conflation is a tactic and a cope.
If it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
But they're still like they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that. Like, do you think of
okay? So now is so
they can't consent. Like, so if you're in high school, you can consent to sex, and Moist has no problem with that. These NPCs have no problem with that, but you can't consent to marriage. How does that make sense?
Sophomore in high school versus senior in high school. What's the difference? Like, what's the difference maturity-wise?
I'm just saying, like, I'm giving you a perspective on where that age would be in life. Like, they can't consent to something like that.
That's probably you're bringing up an outlier that's probably not going to happen as much. I'm saying that these are arbitrary reasons to say like a sophomore versus a senior in high school. How much different were you really maturity wise?
Yeah, and a sophomore.
Like how can you, if you're a 16-year-old, you can consent to having group sex with 20 other 16-year-olds? Like no problem. You know, no problem. And if you like point that out to the NPCs, they'll say, "Oh, I'm not comfortable with that." But like, okay, well, if you're not comfortable with it, would you support laws banning it? And they say, no. Just like the feminists we saw at the beginning, like we don't recommend any limit, any age limit or restriction when it comes to that kind of sexual behavior. That's your right as an adolescent. You can experience and experiment and.
Sophomore is 15 or 16 and a senior in high school is 17 or 18. I wouldn't say that somebody who is a senior and a sophomore is a pedophile. And if you do personally think that it's creepy or weird, then I don't think it should be held against them for the rest of their life. I would.
Why?
However, say that somebody who's 21 in the United States, who's about to finish college, and someone who's 15 years old, who's still at the beginning of high school, relatively speaking, should not be dating because of the large maturity gap.
Why? The maturity gap can exist between a senior and a freshman or a sophomore. That can also, there can be a big maturity gap as well. Like what is the huge qualitative jump that you make from 18 to 21 as opposed to 16 to 18? This is very arbitrary.
This is pretty simple to understand, I think, and to be honest, Charlie doesn't do an amazing job of explaining himself here. SNEAKO is kind of steamrolling him. And
yeah, SNEAKO is steamrolling him, but you also don't do a much better job either. Like you're not saying anything very much more profound or insightful than what Moist is saying.
Wasn't that much of a difference. The reason that you keep saying 18 is because in California, where they post Hollywood movies, it's 18. And so everybody across the world, this is the standard that we believe in. This is the correct age, exactly on the dot. And if it's anything under that, are you going to say here that if a 21-year-old got married to a 17-year-old who was almost 18, is that 21-year-old a pedophile?
I would say that is a morally bad thing to do for sure.
Not morally bad. Not morally bad.
I wouldn't call them. No, I wouldn't call them a.
So when does somebody become a pedophile?
I would say when you have this position, you are.
You're
in
not
your
answering the
20s,
question.
And you are. I'm explaining it.
Okay.
When you are in your 20s and you start preying upon someone who is still a child, a 15, 16, 14, anything under 18, a 21 and a 17-year-old.
But you still haven't specifically defined what a child is.
I did. In
So then why? Okay, there you go. So if pedophile is love of children, and your definition of adult starts at 18, if the 21-year-old marries a 17-year-old who's turning 18 tomorrow, he is a pedophile based off your definition.
As I said, if he would wait, he would not be. Then yeah.
Well, not wait. Based off your definition, that person's
in that position. There is no reason to not wait for the legally established, agreed upon definition of when you stop being a child.
And this is where
So he just reiterates, like, there's no reason why you can't just wait. So that's not a reason. That's not like a reason why that is justified. That age limit is justified. The other thing about mental maturity, or like preying upon, you're preying upon. So if you're a 17-year-old with a 14-year-old, you're not preying upon the 14-year-old. That's not exploitative. But why? Like, again, there's a difference in maturity. And if it's exploitation and power, you can imagine like a 50-year-old wealthy millionaire banker, and he wants to have a relationship with a 25-year-old. Is that exploitative? Or how about the case of Leonardo DiCaprio? Leonardo DiCaprio is this world-famous actor, millionaire, good looking, and he's in his 50s, and he's been criticized for only dating 20-year-olds, I think under 25. And they criticize him, and they say that this is exploitation. This is exploitation. So is that what Leonardo DiCaprio is doing? The same kind of predatory behavior as a 21-year-old being active with a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old? Is that the same predatory relationship? If you're consistent, then you should say, yeah, it is the same. Maybe even worse. Like Leonardo DiCaprio's status and his power is far greater, multiples greater than the women that he's dating versus the 21-year-old to the 16-year-old. So if your problem is really exploitation or power differential and age differential, then you should be equally outraged and equally against that type of relationship that Leonardo DiCaprio has. And you should want to ban that. You should want to legally ban that and have a label, just like you label the 21-year-old a PDF. You should label Leonardo DiCaprio a PDF, because he's taking advantage and preying upon those who are less mature than he is and have less power than he does. So this is, again, so many contradictions in their position.
Charlie gets himself into some serious hot water because he has a very hard time defining what is a child and what is not. For example, I defended Call Me Carson for the allegations made against him, which at worst, from what we know, is that he is a 19-year-old sexted a 17-year-old. This is potentially illegal in some places by Charlie's standards. Do I care? No. The same way.
It's not only illegal, it's also predation. It's predatory behavior. It's an adult taking advantage of a child. And according to your standard, you're saying that it's not being a PDF. Why?
That I don't care about a 20-year-old dating an 18-year-old. SNEAKO is not right that the law doesn't matter, but he is right to say that the way Charlie is arguing about it makes it kind of arbitrary, and he does not make a very good case for where his moral foundations lie.
What you just said is arbitrary. Like, why is the 19-year-old with a 17-year-old not a problem? It's like a 2-year age gap. Like, that's your limit. Well, why just 2 years? Like, what is that based off of? That seems very arbitrary.
I know I sound like a giant spurg right now because I'm like analyzing this as like a debate bro, whatever, but really Charlie just is not.
Oh yeah, you're a debate bro because you're analyzing. Like, you're not analyzing anything. You're just repeating the status quo. You're just repeating the NPC script over and over again. But God forbid you go deeper and become a debate bro, an autistic debate bro.
Do an amazing job here, and you can't claim he did. I think even he would realize that. And Charlie once again makes the mistake here of not being able to explain why he thinks something is wrong.
Tomorrow, if the US government legalized bestiality, if the government legalized incest, based off your logic, there'd be no reason why that's wrong. Can I ask you, Moise, do you think that incest is wrong?
Yes.
Why is incest wrong?
There is under no circumstances any excuse for anyone of the same bloodline to be romantic like that. By no means at all.
Why?
I really think it should be pretty obvious why.
I don't know why.
It should be pretty obvious. That's not a reason. That's not an explanation.
I'm asking
even.
you.
I know where you're going with this because I've heard this argument from another streamer before about like the ethics of incest. If they don't have a kid and thus don't pass down like bad genes that lead to a bad child. I've heard this before.
But I want to hear your answer, because are we going with legal or are we going to follow some sort of morality, sort of consistent morality? Why is incest wrong?
Incest is wrong because I believe that no family dynamic should ever include a sexual relation.
Why?
I don't think that. Because it is not healthy. It is a bad thing to do. It is a horrible thing to subject someone to.
But why is it horrible? Because who told you that?
It's what I believe. And also, if you do have a child with your own kin, the child suffers.
Okay, but say it's two gay brothers. Chris Tyson and other Chris Tyson and Chris. If they're two brothers and they decide to be in a no, genuine question. It's what you believe in. I want to figure out where your beliefs come from. You personally believe that.
My beliefs come from a place of what I believe to be moral, where I don't believe that anyone in the same family has any position to be romantic with one another. I don't think that's a
your
healthy
morality
dynamic.
comes from yourself?
My morality comes from like the world around me. I don't have.
Okay, so if the morality comes from the world around you, then by your logic, if you lived in America in the 1800s where the age of 10 was okay and where the age of 7 was okay in England just 200 years ago, if you followed the world around you, that would be okay. That was fine.
And it's not now because we've evolved past them.
Now, I think one of the main things getting critical.
We've evolved past it. So it's not fine now. So this is... SNEAKO is just destroying this guy. But the other point that I forgot what other point I wanted to make.
Caught up here is that he's not a debate streamer. He's not someone who spends a lot of time thinking about their beliefs and their morality. So when he has to talk to someone like SNEAKO, who, as dumb as he is,
he doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about morality. Like, that's the whole basis of his channel. His whole channel, Moist's whole channel, is outrage, moral outrage against whatever, scammers and people who abuse children or whatever, deception, dishonesty. Like, that's his whole shtick. But he hasn't thought very hard about morality.
Has spent a little more time than Charlie thinking about his beliefs and studying how he can justify banging a kid. He looks bad. Straight up, he does look bad. But I don't think that just because the guy...
Hey, he looks bad just because of what you've accepted as the taboo. Just like if I go to the cultures where, eating fish on your period, and you have women who are eating fish and they're outraged by that, you look bad. You look really bad by eating fish while you're on your period in this culture. Like, you look very, very bad. Like, okay, who cares? I don't really care. What's the reason? Like, why shouldn't I eat fish in this particular time of the month? Give me an actual reason. You can't just say, well, that's what they believe. Like, that's what the people believe. Okay, I don't care. Like, that's not a universal value that I should be subjected to, or I have to abide by.
Guy debating won a debate means that they're right. It means he knows how to justify his position, whereas Charlie does not. He's just a normal dude that accepts the morality of the world around him, which he says himself here. And beyond that, I don't think he spends a lot of time thinking about why he feels the way that he feels. I think this is where one of the biggest points of criticism comes from regarding the Penguin Zero channel in general. He's like,
that's basically saying, like, he's an NPC, like you're acknowledging. He doesn't think very hard about why does he have the beliefs that he does. Yeah, he's an NPC.
A lightning rod for the most commonly accepted take about any situation. On one hand, that's why his channel is so successful, but it's also why people hate him. He's not someone who spends hours and hours thinking about how he feels. He just turns on his camera, records his take, and leaves it at that off the cuff. If anything, this debate has shown me that if nothing else, he's honestly saying what he believes, but it also shows that he has a hard time justifying evenly commonly accepted positions when pressed on them. And that's why SNEAKO was able to get him to justify children transitioning. And this is not even a joke or something ironic that I'm saying. Charlie.
All right, before we get into children transitioning, let me also point out something that'll help you understand, like, why do Westerners have such a hard time explaining why incest is wrong, explaining why minors being married is wrong. They have a very hard time explaining it, and there's a framework that you can use to understand this. It's coming from Jonathan Haidt. So you can read his articles. I already referenced the article that he has on incest. But basically, he asked participants in his psychological study to justify why it's wrong for a brother and sister who both consent to sexual behavior. Why is that wrong? They use protection, they both fully consent, and it's just assumed that there's going to be no harm. In fact, they're going to enjoy it, and they will psychologically benefit. Like, it's going to fulfill them. They're going to be happy. They're going to, like, he makes all of this scenario, this hypothetical, he makes it clear so that there's no harm in the situation. In fact, there's a lot of benefit to engaging in this incestuous act. So do you find that act wrong? And most Westerners say, yeah, I find it wrong. Incest is wrong. But why? And the participants cannot justify it. They cannot justify it. And what Jonathan Haidt explains, as well as other psychologists, is that in the West, there's a certain psychology that people have. It's called weird psychology. Weird stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. The weird psychology based on a number of factors that people in the West develop. That warps the Westerners' moral sense. It warps their ability to morally justify certain positions. And you can read about this in The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. You can also read Joseph Heinrich, The Most Successful People in the World, or The Weirdest People in the World. That's his book. His first book is The Secret of Our Success. Joseph Heinrich is a Harvard anthropologist. Jonathan Haidt is at NYU, I believe. So Jonathan Haidt gives this kind of moral foundations theory. And it's a good theory, I think. But he says that human morality has 5 foundations. There's the care foundation, the fairness foundation, the loyalty foundation, the authority foundation, and the purity foundation. So what do these mean? Care means it's moral to alleviate physical or emotional suffering. Okay, you want to alleviate, you want to reduce harm. Like the harm principle is based on this care foundation. The opposite of care is harm. You cause physical or emotional suffering, harm. So that's care. Fairness, fostering equality and equity. You want things to be fair. You want things to be equal. The opposite, the violation, is to foster inequality, to be unjust, to give some people what they don't deserve. That's being unfair. So then there's loyalty, being loyal to one's group or important others, like your friends, your family, your community, your tribe. So this is like tribalism. Tribalism has a negative connotation. Better to put it as in-group loyalty. In Islam, we have al-wala wal-bara. You know, you're loyal to Muslims, to other believers, and you're disloyal or you disassociate in certain situations from those who do not share your beliefs. That is loyalty. It's a very important part of morality and our moral understanding. And the violation is to do the opposite. You betray your group and you associate with outgroups in spite of your own group. Then authority, showing respect for traditions, showing respect for legitimate authority, showing respect for God as the ultimate authority. Violation is like showing disrespect, blaspheming, for example, against God, violating legitimate authority. And then purity, what is pure, what is sacred, avoiding disgusting behaviors, honoring what is sacred, making sure to be pure. A lot of morality about like bodily changes, like, oh, it's disgusting to get tattoos. Like some people have a visceral reaction against tattoos, or piercings, like, oh, you're piercing your body, you're tattooing your body, for example, because the human body is something sacred, or it's something that you should preserve. It's not yours to do whatever you want with it, for example. That falls under purity foundation. Whereas getting tattoos or engaging in disgusting behaviors like eating feces or like eating insects in certain cultures, that is a violation of purity standards, etc. So this is the moral foundations theory. Now, the interesting thing is that Haidt says that when it comes to weird psychologies, like the Western psychologies in Europe and America, their moral foundation is heavily skewed towards the top two, care and fairness. Like those are the two most important moral inclinations and intuitions that people have in the West, whereas they de-emphasize or they even try to subvert the other three foundations like loyalty, authority, and purity. Those foundations are either disregarded, or they're seen as irrational, or they are actively subverted. So you'll see, in the West, they will actively blaspheme. Like the most important right is the right to blaspheme. That's a violation of authority. That can also be a violation of purity. But no, we have to do something transgressive. We have to, disrespect the crucifix. We have to, have this Olympic ceremony with a drag queen representing Jesus. We have to be subversive like that. That's important. Like the rest of the world is highly offended. The rest of the world it finds that so wrong and immoral to do that because they have this strong sense of, well, there's authority. Like even if I'm not Christian or even if I'm not Muslim, I think it's wrong for you to spit on the Bible or to spit like on a valued religious belief of others people. Like there's their authority foundation or the purity foundation, etc. So this is what happens is that things that are immoral, like you have an intuition that incest is immoral, there's a biological basis for finding incest immoral. It's something universal, but you can't explain that and justify it in terms of harm. You can't justify it in terms of fairness. Like you can't give a explanation or an argument for why incest is wrong in terms of care, in terms of fairness. In fact, if you use the care foundation, that would promote incest because the whole scenario that Jonathan Haidt gives in his paper is that, the brother and sister are going to be happier if they engage in incest. It's actually going to help their mental health. So if you are only thinking about morality in terms of care, you should actually support the brother and sister being involved, or the two brothers that SNEAKO mentioned as being sexually involved, because that's what they want. So you should support what people want if it's going to make them happy. But that's wrong. Like it's incest. It's something because you're trying to justify it with care, but you would justify it in terms of purity. Like that is something disgusting. That is something like vile. And that's a legitimate and it's an important part of our morality that Islam recognizes, that other traditional religions have recognized, traditional cultures recognize that, something is impure, something is disgusting. And that's why we reject it. And that's the reason. And it's biologically based, right? But if you reject purity foundation, if you reject that, then you can't really give a reason. Why is incest wrong? Why is it morally wrong? Now, same thing for this age of consent. The age of consent. You can't really give a care reasoning for it on the basis of care or avoiding harm, reducing harm. Because you've specified, and SNEAKO did this in the debate, like, let's just assume that there is no harm. Let's just assume that this is completely consensual. Like everyone involved wants this to happen, this marriage between the 16-year-old and the 25-year-old. So if we have just stipulated that there's no harm, then what is actually wrong with it? And you can't give a reason. You can't explain. Or fairness, again, if it's consensual, then everyone agrees, like, we want this to happen. So what's the problem? You can't explain why it's immoral because you've already stipulated that, well, there's nothing that has to do with care in the situation, and there's nothing that has to do with fairness. So, and then ultimately it's based on a taboo that is not biologically based. It's not universally shared. In fact, most cultures reject that arbitrary standard. So this is moral foundations theory. It helps you understand like this kind of NPC attitude and behavior. Like their morality is just focused on harm and fairness. But human morality is much broader than just harm and fairness. but the weird psychology has difficulty coping with that. And that's why the weird psychology is so negative in its judgment against Islam and other traditional cultures, because they want to reduce everything to harm and fairness. But that we should reject that. That's not legitimate. The human moral psychology is much more expansive than just those two considerations.
Charlie did do that.
Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting, as you agree with.
You can just see SNEAKO.
This is like my debate with Matt Dillahunty, the atheist, where he was trying to really grandstand about like, oh, you shouldn't be sexually involved with kids. And he was like shouting at me in that debate. Whereas Matt Dillahunty is perfectly fine with gender affirmation surgery and treatment under the age of 18. So so SNEAKO is laughing, and I was laughing too when that came up.
Goes glee as he realizes how bad this is for Charlie. Look, man, there's just there's no circumstance under which a 9-year-old should be able to have a doctor cut their dick off, regardless of what the parents think. If Charlie is going to make the argument that
why? And see here, this is like a purity type of thing, like the sanctity of the body. Like you should not mess with the body. I mean, that's one reason. But I mean, what these NPCs always say is like, oh, well, it's going to cause harm. Like it's harmful to the child. Why? What if the surgery is like completely problem free and there's no and the surgery gets very advanced and it gets very sophisticated and the full transition can happen, or affirmation, whatever you want to call it, and there's no complications and there's all this success? Then is it fine for a 9-year-old to chop their, off, their genitals off? Like, is it fine? I've taken out the harm component. Is it still wrong then?
minors cannot consent to sex, then he can't also make the argument that they can consent to life-changing, irreversible gender surgery for all of time that they'll never be able to get back.
Okay.
What if the surgery makes it reversible? So a 9-year-old can have surgery to become female, and then later the technology allows them to reverse it. Then you're fine with it?
So as long as everyone...
If your parents are okay with it and you are okay with it, I think that's totally a familial decision to make, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just contrast what Charlie just said with what SNEAKO just said.
So if you have someone that's your age coming in saying, I want to marry that child, I don't think that can happen under any circumstance.
So, no. But it's still a personal decision. You're still deciding.
Like, both of these people are basically saying the same thing, but Charlie is arguing in favor of kids transitioning, and SNEAKO is arguing in favor of kids getting groomed.
So if you have someone that's your age...
No, SNEAKO did not argue for kids getting groomed. He said very clearly it's marriage, it's with full consent of adults. How is that grooming? Like, how is that exploitation if the parents are involved?
Coming in saying,
That's very different than the problem with the children getting gender transformation is, even if the parents are involved, like, that is going to cause a lot of harm just because of where the technology is at this point. But like, a Muslim would additionally argue that, well, this violates the sanctity of the body. You're not allowed to change the creation of Allah. That is also a severe moral violation. That's also based in certain biologically based intuitions that people have universally.
I want to marry that child. I don't think that can happen under any circumstance.
I think this debate is really a horrible look for both of them, but I'm slightly more disappointed in Charlie because I hated SNEAKO from the outset, and biting this kind of bullet for Charlie is a really bad look all around. I do not know why he decided to say that.
My hero! Why did you have to?
Obviously, there are some people that are going to be supportive of that position. I think they're wrong. And the amount of people that are now going to use this to show that he's protecting people like Chris Tyson, given the fact he's justifying a 9-year-old getting life-changing surgery because their parents think it's okay, is, well, a lot of people are going to say that, and it's hard to argue with them at this moment. Now, I don't think that Charlie is protecting Chris Tyson, but these people are going to use this clip to show that. It's going to be taken out of context forever till the end of time, and it's going to make a lot of people in his audience, if they see this, really not like him. Now, unfortunately for SNEAKO, he then brings it back around to make himself look bad as well.
Because there's
take the other party out of the equation. It's a personal decision. If I'm 16 and I personally want to marry this girl, she's beautiful, she's 21 years old, her family wants to do it, my family wants to do it, You're saying, I can't do that. We're both consenting. I'm ready to go. I'm physically mature, but I'm not allowed to marry because Moise says that woman's a pedophile. But if then the next day I leave it, I'm depressed, I want to cut my penis off, I can go right into the clinic, snip it off, and start taking HRT like Chris Tyson. That's a society that makes sense to you?
It is. I believe
okay.
everyone has I believe everyone has the right to do with their body what they want to do.
Yeah.
They have the right to do with their body what they want to do, except get married.
I mean, everyone has the right to do what they want when they are adults. We wouldn't say a kid can just take a bunch of drugs because that's...
No, like you also agree that children can have sex, you know, have boyfriend and girlfriend. You also think that they can do with their body, be sexually involved, even involved in all kinds of sexual acts, maybe experiment with the same sex. Like that should be allowed, right? I don't hear you saying that that should be outlawed. Maybe you can clarify it. Maybe you can clarify that. The status quo is that schools teach safe sex as young as elementary school. In fact, now the standard is that even kindergartners should have some idea of what sex is because maybe they're LGBT. So we have to support these LGBT kindergartners with appropriate sex education, age-appropriate sex education. So that comes with the understanding that those kids in elementary school can be sexually involved. So that's the status quo that we're all supposed to ignore and pretend like this is like SNEAKO's the problem here.
It's what they want to do. We wouldn't say a fucking 13-year-old can drink alcohol. Why? Well, because they're too young to understand the short-term and long-term effects of drug use. In the same way that we wouldn't say they consent to sex. And in the same way, we shouldn't be saying they should be able to go to the doctor and get their whole thing snipped off. That is just really dumb. And even outside of taking that position, Charlie just had a very
Why is it dumb?
hard time explaining his rationale for his own position, and it was not a good look.
Do words need to have definitions?
Yes, and so does the age of consent.
Mm-hmm. When we use the English language, should the words that we use match the definition of the word?
Yes.
Yes, you're not doing that.
You don't want statutory. We won't use colloquialism.
There you go.
It's
So
statutory
within this conversation, you change it.
Whereas SNEAKO, as wrong as he was, had a much easier time and appeared a lot more confident. Honestly, I think Charlie came into this debate relatively unprepared, and SNEAKO was way more prepared. So when SNEAKO debates someone who's never had a debate in their life, he's going to steamroll them. But the problem...
Never had a debate in your life. It's a conversation. Has Moist had a conversation, like a contentious conversation with someone who disagrees with him in his life? Like, that's what I don't understand. Like, you want to call it a debate, but that's the kind of conversations that you have in life. You will often have someone who disagrees with you, really fundamentally disagrees with you, and you have to convince them, and they will try to convince you. That's like what a contentious conversation is all about. But we find it's partly because of the education system. The education system, as much as they say that, oh, we want to teach critical thinking, when they say critical thinking, they mean, oh, throw out your traditional beliefs, throw out religion, question God, like question gender roles or gender identity, like question everything that's traditional. That's what it means to be a critical thinker. But question it by adopting, our liberal version, like our liberal secular status quo, and be an NPC. Like that is critical thinking. When they want to export critical thinking studies to schooling around the world, internationally, to the Muslim world, to wherever, that's what they mean. We want to get all of these countries to accept our NPC programming and become liberal secular Westerners that are atheists and they're pro-LGBT, they're feminist, etc. That's what's critical. But critical thinking in terms of two opposing sides, and you have to bring reasons and you have to debate, that's not really taught in schools. Maybe if you go to and you join the debate club, like maybe they'll have more of that. But in general, it's not really taught very well, if at all. And that's, when they're saying, oh, Moist has never gotten in a debate before. Yeah, he's never gotten in a contentious conversation before. He never had to defend a position by giving reasons, like step by step. Here are the premises and this is the conclusion. So if that's the case, he's like very undereducated.
Even outside of that is that Charlie said what he said about children transitioning, and I don't agree with that. I just don't. Man.
Wow. Good for you. You don't agree with that. Wow. What a brave statement. You're amazing.
Yeah. Jesus. Overall, this was a pretty entertaining debate, so I hope more of them happen. But realistically, I think Critical needs to be more prepared if he's going to have debates like this. I don't like that he took that position. I hope he changes his mind or something. If he doesn't prepare in the future for debates like this, SNEAKO or whoever else is going to steamroll him, as wrong as they are about the age of consent. Now, I'm curious to see what you guys think in the comment section below. I know this is like the most contentious topics in the world right now, the stuff they're discussing, so I'm curious to see what you guys thought. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me?
Okay, so that's the reaction to the debate, and I have some clips additionally from the debate that I want to show you that he didn't include, so I'll pull those up. It should be noted that now Moist is backtracking. He's saying, oh, I thought SNEAKO was just joking, or oh, I thought SNEAKO was just saying hypothetically. Like, he's giving like this very bizarre explanation of his statements to walk back the fact that he defends children transitioning because it's been such a backlash. Like, his fans are shocked because that's just a bridge too far. Like, the culture hasn't changed yet. The status quo hasn't changed. Like, Moist is ahead of the curve. Maybe in 10 years, they'll be more supportive of gender transition. Maybe the technology has to advance. You know, this gender affirmation technology, the hormone therapy needs to advance so that there are fewer detransitioners and there are fewer complications. But for now, the NPC programming is that, no, we're not exactly cool with children. Like, you got to be 18 to chop it off. Let's be reasonable about things here. You have to be this arbitrary age of 18 before you can make a decision like that. Then when you're 18, yeah, snip, snip. Do whatever you want. Okay, so then here are some clips that I thought were really impressive from SNEAKO.
That is completely wrong. That is a 12-year-old.
Okay, you said the age.
18-year-old.
Remove the age for a second because I think it's confusing you. Why is that wrong?
That is someone who is literally still in middle school. That is someone who is playing with fucking dolls right now.
That's a middle schooler.
So a middle schooler, 12-year-old, is playing with dolls. Did he go to 7th grade? Like, I don't remember any 7th graders playing with dolls. As I told you, like, they were concerned about, you know, looking good for their boyfriends that are getting asked out to eat and mess around. That's what I remember 12th graders doing when I was in 7th grade or 6th grade even. And this was, by the way, 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. And this is in America, in Texas, conservative state. And public school, this is how the girls were behaving, not playing with dolls.
A high schooler, but why is that wrong? Tell me why that's wrong.
No, it's someone who's going off to college,
okay,
most likely.
Tell me why that's wrong.
The person going off to college is driving. The person going off.
What does an adult look like? Looks like me. Looks like you.
Yeah.
We've went through puberty. I know you're an adult because you've went through puberty. I know I'm an adult because I went through puberty. I see a child. I know that's a child. That's a child has not went through puberty yet. That's a kid. I'm very aware. It's very simple.
But you said like a 12-year-old could be physically mature. Like you said,
they're mostly not. They're mostly not. And even a child that's now become an adult at 13, 12, 13, something like that, would I think that they're mentally ready? I personally, most of the time, I would not think so. Would their parents think that child is mentally ready? Most of the time, I wouldn't think so. I don't think the parents would want that for a kid 12. I think they would want them to develop more. Because you should follow the morality of the parents. The parents are going to care for that kid way more than the government.
So this is noteworthy because SNEAKO makes it very clear his standard. What is the distinction between a child and an adult? It has to do with physical maturity. And Moist has no response to this. That's very telling. Like, what is the problem with SNEAKO's definition? And you can't articulate anything other than to repeat, oh, well, that's weird, or oh, that's not what most people accept. Just asserting something that is not true, by the way.
Mature.
But you see, this issue, in my worldview, this is eradicated. Because pedophiles, predators, they only exist in a society that allows the age of consent, that encourages people to have sex out of wedlock. In a society, in a world where you're only supposed to pursue people in search of marriage, that's eradicated. Because these people, these predators, you're saying
it's not.
Yes, it is.
What?
Brilliant point. brilliant point from SNEAKO, mashallah, just knocks it out of the park. According to Islam, you won't have this kind of degeneracy. You won't have these predators. You won't have this kind of behavior that we find rampant in terms of degeneracy, childhood sexuality, teachers trying to get with kids. You won't have that because you have a standard of marriage, and that is what is acceptable. So that is the sexual need is addressed through marriage. This institution of marriage where everything is above board, everything is in the light of day. You don't have to sneak around. You don't have to go behind closed doors to take advantage of someone. When you take, just like when it comes to degeneracy for adults, like over 18, you take away degeneracy by having marriage, by making marriage easy, by promoting marriage. That is something that we've seen historically. As soon as you destroy the institution of marriage with the sexual revolution in the 60s, that's when so much degeneracy starts to spread. That's when so many problems start to spread. The same thing is the case when it comes to adolescents, minors, and you take away the option of marriage, then you have this rampant rise of degeneracy, taking advantage, exploiting these teenagers or younger at schools, in sports. You have so many examples. Every single day there's a news item about it. And the statistics show that it's a rampant problem. SNEAKO has the solution. And again, Moist has absolutely no response. Here's another good part.
If you're not a Catholic anymore, then why do you think a man can become a woman? That's nothing biblical.
I was a Baptist, not a Catholic, but it's because I believe that a lot of the old worldview is outdated and ever-changing, and I believe that all spirituality preaches love and tolerance. One of your big things is love speech, but most of what you spew is hatred towards other people.
I don't spew.
So Moist is giving his religious background. See, this is another thing that we appreciate about SNEAKO. He always brings it back to the wider discussion, like, what do you believe? Where do your beliefs come from? Where does your morality come from? And he redirects the conversation to religion and God. And so he's asking about Moist's religious background. He was Baptist. So this is effective dawah. Like, SNEAKO should be praised for this. It's a very and he does it very skillfully. Like with some of the biggest YouTubers or streamers in the world, he is opening up a conversation about Islam and inviting them to Islam. So may Allah bless and increase our brother SNEAKO. But interesting how this former Baptist says that, oh, well, I believe in tolerance for all. Well, you're not very tolerant of, the other cultures that allow over 18 adults to marry minors. You're not very tolerant of that. So is that hate? Is that hateful, like your intolerance that you're spreading against them? This is another inconsistency. And SNEAKO, I think, points that out later. Then here's another really good part.
My definition. I told you the definition. The definition. Okay. If you went through puberty, you're an adult. That's the definition of adult. So yes, if you're an adult and you had a mustache, you're ready to get married, fine. Okay.
Okay.
You get your beliefs.
14-year-old adult.
We're going in circles.
14-year-old adult. What is the benefit to society?
A 14.
How does that help your society?
Mm-hmm. What?
14.
What's the benefit to your society of a 14-year-old getting married? So this is like the gotcha from Moist against SNEAKO, but look at how SNEAKO responds.
14-year-olds just got married in your society. How is that helpful?
They stay away from the Zionist degeneracy. They stop watching porn. They stop having sex out of wedlock. They stop, going to parties they shouldn't go to. They're maybe not drinking. They're in a healthy relationship. They're staying away from all this stuff. They're building with each other. They're having a marriage. They're praying together. They're focusing on building a family together in the future. This is much better for society. So I want to ask you.
This is a body slam. This is a complete knockout. And you can see Moist here, like, rethinking his life choices. Like, he has absolutely no response. SNEAKO has just listed out, these are all the benefits. This is all the degeneracy. These are all the problems that get wiped out. Even much more could have been said, but he gives an exhaustive list, like a pretty exhaustive list. What about like depression also? You have all this kind of, I think the statistic is that over 50%. Like, it's some ridiculous, like 2 out of 3 girls are suffering from mental health problems that are caused by social media and are caused by like different standards, like body standards and beauty standards, etc. They're suffering, these adolescent girls, these minors. And when you take away that kind of social media where you're displaying your body and you're in this endless competition to attract attention of men by showing your body, wearing makeup, acting sexy, everything that is on Instagram, on TikTok, etc. You take that away because you want a society based on the wholesome institution of marriage and purity, then that depression and that mental illness caused by that also goes away. That's a huge benefit. That increases the quality of life of so many, countless millions, tens, hundreds of millions of girls, of little girls and boys. That's another benefit they could have mentioned.
You said you get your morals from your personal experiences and the people around you.
Everybody does. That's how everyone formulates.
So
their own
your morality
perspective
is based off of the people around you.
You take in all of the information around you. It's everyone does. You do.
No, that's not true. Like that goes against rationality. Like, you have to have a reason for why you believe in what you believe and why you think certain things are right and other things are wrong. You have to have a reason. You have to be able to explain it. If you can explain it by saying, well, this is based on God, this is based on my religious belief, these metaphysical commitments that I have, okay, that's still a reason. But to say, no, I just believe it because that's what other people believe, like, that's being an NPC. That is that is the definition of irrationality.
Still for myself to feel better.
I mean, I guess
that's still a personal decision. So why is it okay for a kid to cut his dick off?
He and his family, or he and she and that family, is making that decision for that child's life. If that's the path they want to go down, it's like choosing a fucking sport. You can do what you...
So choosing to change your gender or to go through that procedure, taking hormones, that's like choosing a sport. Like, you want to play badminton or you want to play soccer or basketball, like, choose a sport. You can make that decision. Maybe you consult your parents, maybe you don't. But gender affirmation is the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or you're 9 years old. So this is the clip that is really driving his fans insane. Because the programming, the NPC programming, still doesn't accept that. But in 10 years, they'll accept it and they'll justify it by saying, well, it just makes sense. That's what everyone believes. It just makes sense that a 9-year-old can start taking hormone blockers and getting operations. It just makes sense. Like, that's obvious.
Dead? Okay. What? Same thing.
Dead.
Okay, I cut the 9-year-old's dick off. I'm setting it up for death in a sense. They have the highest suicide rate out of any demographic of any people ever. They're depressed. Their body's warped. They're physically deformed. You are doing something permanent to them that is irreversible. That is harm. Harm is almost
so do gamblers. So does every
You know what's forbidden in Islam?
Gambling. Yeah. I get it.
You know, it's also,
gambled?
of course I have. I've drank before too, and I've had sex out of wedlock.
Exactly.
Does that make me perfect? No. Islam is perfect, but we are not perfect. This is why we need rules. Alcohol, same thing. It harms you. That's why we ban it. Sex out of wedlock, it harms you. That's why we ban it. Cutting your dick off harms you. That's why we ban it.
And why are you?
So here SNEAKO is like really appealing to that harm foundation. These things are harmful, therefore they're prohibited in Islam. They're banned. But, you can recognize that there are other moral foundations as well. Not everything that is immoral has to do with it being harmful. Like, for example, lying. Like, sometimes if you lie, you're actually going to make people feel better. Like, you just tell them a lie and they feel better. You hide the truth. Sometimes the truth is bitter, so just lie about it. But we still feel that that's morally wrong. Like, you're lying, you're deceiving. Even if it does make people feel better, you should be truthful and you should be honest. that's a moral foundation that is not based on just pure harm.
Are you not as outspoken about things like gambling? Like every kid.
Oh, yes, I
calling them
am.
out?
Oh my, yes,
don't
absolutely
see
am.
on Aiden Ross.
I
When was the last
absolutely
time
do. I call them out all the time. Every single chance I
you do that for their life and their happiness?
Okay.
Then that is
then
fine.
can I kill the 9-year-old?
What?
If everybody around, the parents decide, if everyone says like, yeah, kill this 9-year-old, can I do it? Healthy 9-year-old, no problems, not depressed, nothing. Everyone around, they get consent from the parents. Can I kill the 9-year-old?
I think it should be pretty obvious why the answer would be no there.
Why?
There's a huge
It should be pretty obvious why the answer is no. It's not obvious because, again, euthanasia is a thing. Like, if a child can make a decision, like going through surgery, and their parents consent to that, well, what about euthanasia? Ending it all. And in Canada, I don't think minors can make that decision. They haven't gone that far yet. But it's the same logic. Why can't a 9-year-old make that decision? Isn't it the 9-year-old's body, his or her body, his or her choice? Okay, final clip.
That's true. I believe in this completely, and whatever God says, I will follow. That's not contrarian. I follow God. I'm a slave to God. I'm a servant for
So then
God.
why are you the only one that keeps getting banned when so many people follow this religion?
You know
There's
who else
so many
gets banned?
people that follow
You know what's
the
funny?
religion
Like
as well.
other people, other religious, like outspoken religious people. Nick Fuentes is an outspoken Catholic, banned everywhere. Everywhere. What did he say? What did he do? You know what's funny? Chris Tyson, who you believe is a confirmed pedophile, still allowed on Instagram, still allowed on YouTube. Mr. Beast, who platform and I'm happier than I've been in a long time. Can't you see like how much happier I get? I don't know. My community can. When I'm in Florida, when I'm around Shaitan, when I'm around this like cut your dick off world, I get angry. When I'm here, when I'm around my people, I was in the Masjid today. It was Juma prayer. I went to Hagia Sophia. When I'm around Muslims, I'm not a contrarian. I agree with them. I put my head to the floor at the same time with them. I recite Surah Fatiha at the same time as them. I'm one of a lot of people who believe in the same thing. Islam is the fastest growing religion. It's one of the biggest religions in the world. I'm not a contrarian to them at all. I admit and I submit to Allah, and I say that this is the only religion that's true. I believe in this completely, and whatever God says, I will follow. That's not contrarian. I follow God. I'm a slave to God. I'm a servant for
So then
God.
why are you?
So I thought that was just a moving statement from SNEAKO. That just, when you hear him talk about Islam, you can hear the love that he has for Allah and his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it just like softens my heart and warms my heart to hear SNEAKO talk like this. And he's like, again, he's doing it with the biggest streamers, the biggest YouTubers doing dawah. So may Allah bless SNEAKO and increase him and protect him from shaitan, from shayateen, from devils amongst humans and jinn. And we love our brother SNEAKO. We really do. MashaAllah. And he, again, absolutely destroyed. So you go watch this debate. It is on his Rumble channel, on SNEAKO's Rumble channel. Unfortunately, he's banned from YouTube for illegitimate reasons. Go and watch. If you want to see the whole 2.5 hour, I couldn't react to everything. Showed you some highlights, show you how some of these NPCs react to it. And I thought it was very interesting. It's a fascinating topic, and it is valuable to talk about this thing as Muslims because this is the primary attack that is used against Muslims, is this age of Aisha radiallahu anha to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to understand it and be able to talk about it intelligently and bring reasoning and bring understanding. So that is the reaction. Now let's go to super chats and your comments. Let's see if I can get to them because we don't want to get the make the stream too long. Okay, this is a correction from Niger. It's actually must be married, not 13. We're a Muslim country. Okay, Jazakallah khair for the clarification. There is no minimum age of marriage in Niger. Bro, if someone insults Islam, can we harm them physically? No. When you're in somewhere where it's illegal, there's assault. Do not assault anyone. Do not violate the law. Do not violate the law. Now, if you mean a government, if there's a government following Islamic law, can the government impose penalties for those who insult Islam? Yes, those are called blasphemy punishments, apostasy punishments, and that is what Islam prescribes for under Islamic governments. So don't violate the law. Do not commit assault against people if they insult Islam, even if they are trying to provoke you. They're trying to provoke you so that they can get you in trouble. Famo says their mindset is loony. A minor to them is allowed to fornicate with other minors however many times they want, yet marriage is taboo. Exactly. Cordishir, thank you for your super chat. Hans says liberals raise the issue of power dynamics regarding age, but they ignore it regarding wealth or intelligence discrepancies. Absolutely. They ignore it. Same like with the Leonardo DiCaprio situation or many kinds of relationships. The only people who are consistent on this issue of power dynamics are the hardcore feminists like Andrea Dworkin. She is a Jewish feminist, and she said that all heterosexual relationships are exploitative and basically rape. Why? Because there's always a power dynamic between men and women in patriarchal societies, and all societies are patriarchal. Unfortunately, the feminist revolution hasn't overturned patriarchy, so every society is patriarchal, and in every patriarchal society, men have a power over women. They're more powerful just inherently because of patriarchy. So any relationship between a man and a woman is exploitative and should be banned. And that's why every relationship should be between two women, lesbianism. And she was an advocate of lesbianism. Somewhat related, she died alone and without any relationship. But that was her theory. She's a respected feminist theorist and thinker. Even if Charlie's claims were true, many of his arguments are fallacious as they fall under argumentum ad populum or argument from majority. Yeah, just appealing to the majority. It's NPC stuff. Thank you, Brother Muhammad, for your super chat, and Daman for your super chat. Let's see. A lot of these are not related. Can I discuss the Industrial Revolution, capitalism, resented marriage, which pushed the 18 law? I remember you saying something like this. Yeah, if you want to see more information about this, go watch my debate on the age of Aisha radiallahu anha. It's on the channel. Go to the debate playlist and you can see it. And in that debate, I pointed out the sociological and historical factors that led to this age of this magic number 18. Like, where did it come from? Has to do with the Industrial Revolution and the need for more people in the workforce, including women. So if you want women to go work in the factories, they can't get married at age 13 and get pregnant, or age 14 or 15. You have to set a minimum age of marriage at 18 so that they go through school, get all that schooling, and then they're more likely to go to college and then go into the factory or wherever, to go into the workforce, basically. So there's an economic component why you want to keep the age of consent or the age of marriage high at 18. It's fine if you fornicate, because you can fornicate and then go to the factory. That's not a problem. Marriage is the problem, because then it's a commitment. You have to fall into these gender roles where you're a mother, a wife and a mother. That's no good. We want fornicators, not mothers, not wives and mothers. Why Awaken Pennsylvania? No. Shout out to Pennsylvania. Why is 18 the age of adulthood? What makes that age so important in the West? And by the way, they're cool with 16-year-olds driving heavy and fast cars. Good questions. Yaqub, thank you, brother, for your generous super chat. Arian Ukhti says, a sister says, what about the right of young women to choose a mature husband? Some teenage girls actually like men in their 20s. Isn't this harmful, preventing them from having a family, a home, a husband? Very good point. Very good argument. Awakened Pennsylvanian says, why would God or nature give these adolescent reproduction capabilities if they're mentally incapable and immature, even on an evolutionary basis? But in the West, it's normal to be trans. That's moral. Yeah, it's a good point. Like, why is physical maturity and mental maturity so far apart in the West? Isn't that a problem? Like, you're physically mature as young as 10 or 11 or 12, but you're not mentally mature until you're 25 or 20. Why is there such a massive discrepancy? Could that be because of like your culture? Maybe your culture is backwards or wrong. Shima, appreciate your super chat. Brother, you're actually the final boss of debates. Jazakallah khair. That's very kind of you to say. I don't know about that. Apidra, thank you for your generous super chat. Power dynamic. I'm pretty sure a 13-year-old boy is still stronger than a 13-year-old girl, yet that's completely fine. Yeah, a lot of contradictions, unfortunately. Okay, let's look at any other super chats, or let me just look at the general chat right now. Anything related? Alan Iverson is in the chat. Another Philadelphia 76er. Love your crossover, dude. Let's see. Mega Muslim Chat says, Moist Critical is an entertainer. He needs the crowd to keep going. Yes, that's true. He has to have the popular approval. Also, the YouTube approval. Because I said, YouTube handpicks his videos for the trending tab. Why? According to liberals, most people in history are PDF, including most people today. Yep. But no matter how many times you cite that for them, it doesn't get them to reflect. Just like as many times as you cite that, hey, do you know that in the vast majority of the world, there's no taboo on pregnant women eating fish? That's not going to be convincing to someone who is so entrenched in that one particular culture. This is an interesting point. A lot of movies, Netflix shows, etc. show teenage girls looking for a boyfriend and having sex. These liberals don't find anything wrong with it at all. But whoa, when it comes to the age of Aisha, radiallahu anha. Excellent point. Brilliant point there. Let's see. Watch Tom Dark's reaction to Muhammad Hijab and SNEAKO. The guy is a smug clown. I haven't seen that. But yeah, he seems pretty smug. Like, that's what always annoys me. People who are smug and have this superiority, but they can't back it up. Like, if you're smug and you act superior and you're actually like brilliant and you actually have skills or whatever, okay, then I can respect it. I might not like it, but I can respect it. But with liberals, and by liberal, I mean the more expansive definition of liberal. So even like Matt Walsh, the conservative, he's like a conservative liberal. So smug, but he doesn't back it up with facts or with sound argumentation. So that smugness is grating on my nerves. People who are incompetent yet are acting smug. It's like the worst combination. Okay, anything else on the topic, not unrelated, because I don't want to open up a entirely new topic at 2.5 hours or almost 3 hours. Thank you so much, Jazakallah Khair, True Red Crime. Always love your comments and your support. Really kind of you. Okay. Very long stream, much longer than I expected it to be. That seems to be the pattern, right? Just talk too much. I'm yap. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. If you want more information on the age of consent, debating this, as Muslims, we have that debate on the channel. I debated a Christian. It was a live debate. And I bring up a lot of these points. Obviously, the Christian had no answer, and he couldn't cope with the fact that his Bible doesn't prevent or have anything against minor marriage. So that's an entertaining debate, and you'll hear some arguments that you may not have heard before. We also have a couple of debate analyses where we go and analyze that debate with a Muslim doctor, Dr. Abdullah. We present a lot of the scientific claims, like, because the other side says, well, it's damaging. It's medically damaging for a minor, a child, to be involved in sex. So we go and we look at the supposed studies that prove that. I mean, it's disproven by the simple fact that, well, there's no harm, apparently, if two 12-year-olds have sex or two 10-year-olds or two 9-year-olds have sex. There's no harm. Apparently, you have to teach safe sex. Obvious, of course, it has to be safe. It has to be safe. But there's no harm in that case. So why is there suddenly a harm if it's someone who's older than an arbitrary line that you've drawn? We analyze the supposed medical data and debunk all of that nonsense. So, yeah, I thought this was a relevant debate to talk about, involving two very prominent people on social media, SNEAKO and Mr. Moist. And I hope you enjoyed this show. We're going to have another show coming up later this week, which I think you'll like as well. So make sure to subscribe so that you get notifications. Put on that notification bell so that you'll know when the lives are scheduled, when they're coming. You can check in and you can catch them live and enjoy them live. If you want to listen to the show in audio form, because for some reason you can't use video, you want it like a podcast, you can download YouTube podcast app, or I think it's called YouTube Music, or I'm not sure exactly the name of the app, but it's free, and you can listen to all of our shows in audio format only. And some people prefer that, especially if they're traveling. Then you can more easily download the episodes and listen to them. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. It's free, obviously. The link is in the description. I've already explained why it's important for you to do so. I hope you subscribe to the list. We already have thousands, tens of thousands of subscribers, and they get exclusive updates from MuslimSkeptic. So that's another reason to join it. Okay, well, that's our show. Inshallah, we're gonna see you again next week with another good episode, inshallah. Till next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.